What up, bitches? This is Oh So Curious, and I'm just kind of in a mood. Hey, welcome to the show. We're talking about all kinds of stuff. Not just me, not just your good old friend Andrew Frankel. Hi, by the way. But I also am joined by my friend Rolan. Rolan, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Andrew. I thought it was going to go on me. Oh, now it is. Hi. Yes.
There he
I'm
is.
good. How are you?
Good. You know, things are bumping along. It's an overcast day in Los Angeles. That's my favorite experience of Los Angeles, honestly. And
I can see
people
that
are
in the background of yours.
this is all fake. It's a facade. It's not real. Anyway, yeah. And on the other side of the panel, I got my friend Dan. Dan, how are you, my friend?
I apologize for calling you Mags at the start of the show there. I had the
Did
wrong
you?
graphic.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, so you were
That's
like,
I
"What's up,
feel like
bitches?" And like all
she'll
this.
be angrier about that than me.
Yeah.
That's probably true. Um, wow, this is not gonna
Well, it's
age
good to see
well.
you both.
Yeah.
Dan,
Okay.
what's going on the show today? Just so that I know, but also anybody watching this should also have a general idea. What's happening?
Yeah. Let's take a look. We go to the rundown. So, first, we're going to pay our tribute to Robbie Coltrane. He passed away this week at the age of 72, I believe. She-Hulk, episode 9, the finale. Fresh off. Well, Kevin happened. The Rings of Power, episode 8, which is also the finale of that show, season 1. Then we'll talk about Halloween Ends. I did not watch it, but Roland and Andrew did, or I think they did. Black Adam.
I
We're
did.
going to be looking ahead to Black Adam. There's been a lot of news about that movie recently, and it looks like certain somebody might be coming back to the DCEU. So
Well,
yeah,
that's
that's the
exciting.
rundown.
All right. Well, that's a packed show. We got a lot going
Oh,
on.
yeah.
Is there before we get into just you know the uh, the stuff? Is there anything that you're watching? Anything that like tickled you particularly this week? What's new in the world?
I don't know. Dan, what have you been watching?
Well, I think so the only thing I'd really, because here's the thing, my week has been incredibly busy, so I haven't even been watching a lot of football this week, like Thursday night football, Monday night football. I
Yeah.
only watched it in part.
Oh,
But I sat down and
by the
watched
way, for
Top
the
Gun.
audience, that's a big deal. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but that is a big deal. He has that playing during meetings. So,
It
Yeah.
is playing right now on the side. Well,
exactly.
it's a Sunday. It's a football goes on all day long on Sunday. I not only do I watch like an NFL football, I also watch the Premier League football because I'm a big European soccer fan, lived in the UK. Anyway, the point being, the only thing that I truly watched this week on TV that wasn't football, well, for the few minutes that I did watch football, was Top Gun Maverick last night. Sat down and watched it for the first time at home since seeing it in theaters, and it's very enjoyable. I mean, there
It
was a
still
certain
holds
special
up.
feeling to watching that for the first time in the theater that I think is going to be hard to replicate. The sound quality and the visual quality of, I mean, I have a pretty decent system at home, so
Yeah, I know.
uh, it was a good time. It's a very watchable movie. Yeah,
Yeah. Did you have a little time to squeeze in some She-Hulk?
I did. I squeezed it in this morning, um,
Oof.
and
You know what? I regret saying squeeze it in.
Yeah, that
I
was.
regret that.
yeah,
Andrew,
it's an
have you
interesting
watched
choice
any of
of
the
words.
episodes yet? You're going
I
to be
watched
involved
I
in the
watched
discussion?
the first episode and vomited, and so I'm just I'm not committing to that.
Yeah.
And then every week you guys tell me about it, so why not
Yeah,
that?
we will
Um,
talk about that definitely.
yeah,
There's
as you know,
thoughts.
I've been watching House of the Dragon, uh, and
Yeah.
I spoiler alert don't like it. Um, and turns out people aren't crazy about what I've been saying about it, and I think we had a lot of engagement this week. So
Yeah.
let's take a look at the comments, plural, of the week.
Yeah, selection of some of the most bold comments, let's call it that.
Ah, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Comment of the week from Roderick Kingfield. It's a slow burn, but the buildup is necessary. This isn't GOT where they could just jump into it. To understand the dance of dragons, we need to see all the drama and bad choices that led up to it. I'd rather have this than whatever Rings of Power is pretending to be. You know what? That's fair. I don't, nothing objectionable there. I do think that watching Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, it helps to have read the source material so that you have an understanding of who everybody is, why certain things are happening, what's being shown to you. I don't like the style of storytelling in this show, and it's hard to latch on to details that matter, like names. And the visual aspects of it, well, it's beautiful to look at. And there are some really just well-constructed scenes. I find myself lost and guessing a lot. Maybe I'm just stupid, but in that case, like, you know how many stupid people there are in the world? A lot. And we should make shows understandable for them.
That's one way of putting it. Yeah.
What else we got?
Okay, moving on.
Oh, same video. Oh, see, okay, this is another one. Jake Milano. Emin didn't trigger them by calling them boys too many times. It was because he used strong to describe them twice, hinting at them being bastards of Harwin Strong. By the way, a name I didn't even know existed, even though I've seen the character. He was waiting for one interesting criticism during this entire video. Just talking in a tired tone and saying things like, yikes, or this is boring, which I didn't say. It isn't that you made bad points, you just didn't make any points. To this I respond and I say, you did not finish the video. I summarize what happened, and in this week, yes, I was lackluster, I was tired. It was around midnight and I just watched the episode. But that's some real insight into what voice acting does to a message. Because all I did was tell you what happened tiredly. And people interpreted that as me being bored, which, granted, I was pretty bored. But as far as the Harwin Strong versus the boys thing, anybody who didn't hear the name Harwin Strong, and if they said it at any point, it was hard to hear, anybody watching that scene would have thought, oh, he's insulting them. And the insult works both ways. You know, the bastard thing, probably understand more the, you know, his outrage, like, say it again. But then he calls them strong boys. Are you not strong? You're not. I was like, the scene happened.
That that scene, I watched part of it because I was getting us some edit. I would do some editing work, and I was watching just on the side. I'm not really watching the show, so this is out of context. I sort of know what's happening, but that scene, to like, well, once the king leaves the room, it just turns into an episode of like the Real Housewives or Jersey Shore or whatever.
The whole show is just gossip, and it's not even real gossip. Maybe that's just, you know, our world, because even the way people discuss politics today, it's just gossip. It's just, did you hear what he said? And it's not, nobody's arguing policy or like beyond what they're told to say. But anyway. It's everything is the gaffe that this person made, the statement. It's just and we talk about it not because we're, you know, concerned about the government. We like the drama and the gossip. Anyway, is that it? Or
we got one more. So, you know, there's been an escalation so far. We went from like somebody who was basically saying, you know, you need everything to happen, and then second person basically insulted you. Now this person had has a slightly different perspective on the whole situation.
Wait. What's this one? Comment of the week from Totally Not a Cop. I actually fell asleep. Okay.
That's a good comment. All right. Straightforward. You're not stressing about the details. It tells you how it is.
Well, does it? Does
feel
it?
like it does.
There's a little ambiguity here, and that's
Really?
Did they
I
fall
will
asleep?
say the name kind of like makes us are you, are you not?
Here, here's the thing: is he saying he fell asleep during the episode or during my review? I don't know.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
Either was
also
possible. Either was possible. Um,
yeah.
you know,
I
I don't think it's specified. It's
it
a
doesn't.
simple four
You know,
words.
and the thing is, like, first of
I
all,
think I think they have your back, you know?
okay,
If you're
that
saying
was
it's
my
boring,
interpretation. That was my interpretation. Um, because yeah, that was a boring episode, and honestly, the show is it strings out a lot of stuff. It shows you things you have no interest in. Like there was one scene where the Balerian King, and I realized I've been saying, or Balarian King, I've been saying Valyrian, thinking that all of the names sound the same. There's like Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra and Valyrian and Balarian, and it's ugh.
No, it's confusing. Very confusing. I
Deliberately so, it seems. And there's a scene where they're talking, and then in the next, and they're like plotting and planning and all this stuff, and then he dies. He gets slaughtered in the next scene, and it's like, well, it's dumb. I didn't need to see that. Why'd you show me that? Like, who cares?
You know what I will
It wasn't-
say? That knife, the sword cut real
Oh yeah,
clean. Like it was,
that was a good shot. That was a good shot.
it was the most,
Yeah, that
the
was
most
that was
like
nuts. You
clean,
should check that out, Roland, if you haven't seen it. It's
flat
like,
cut
I've
ever.
already heard the sound effect. I don't need to see
Yeah, yeah.
anything else.
And he's like,
honestly.
I'll let him keep
has
his
it.
tongue because it's sort of like he doesn't quite like cut at the neck. It's like
he
a little bit of the
slices off the
chin,
entire top half of his, like, in terms of
like
practical effect.
half of the jaw is
go watch my review because I have it
Yeah.
right there. It's just the, but don't fall asleep because I'm really boring. All right, that's it for comments of the week. Yeah,
Yes, yeah. I could have pulled more.
right.
There's definitely more out there.
I know there were more.
Yeah.
I read
Yeah.
some of them. Anyway, you know what? Come back next week. I gotta watch an episode tonight, and maybe I'll be more entertaining. We'll see.
I was gonna be like, man, the Gruffalo, R.I.P. I was gonna sprinkle it in, that cracker actor. Which,
Okay.
by the way,
Yeah.
terrible way. You go on Google, you look up Robbie Coltrane. It says Harry Potter and Cracker actor. And if you don't know that Cracker was a longtime TV show in the UK, it is hilarious.
I was. That's how
This
I
man
was
is
like.
dead and they're insulting him.
It took me a little
Well-
while to kind of because I was looking up his filmography and yeah, he won 3 back-to-back BAFTAs for Best Actor, the British Television Academy, and a feat that
Wow.
apparently only was matched by Michael Gambon. The two co-starred in the Harry Potter franchise. Of course, one Dumbledore, the other Hagrid. So yeah, I mean, he had a whole career well before he got the role for Hagrid, and it wasn't. I actually watched an interview where they asked him like, well, how did you first, find out about this and like for the role of Hagrid, and he was like, well, there were some I forget who he said told him, but he's like a friend or somebody like said, hey, have you read the script for this new Harry Potter thing? They're looking for an all English cast, and I remember Robin. Not I remember personally, but I remember watching something else recently where they talked about how Robin Williams was publicly campaigning for the role of Hagrid for a long time, but they wanted somebody who was British. They wanted an all-British
I'm
cast.
really glad
And
it wasn't him.
in hindsight, yes. But in essence, yeah. I mean, Robbie Coltrane read for the role, and he always comes across as somebody in interviews or like you see the behind-the-scenes stuff for Hagrid and Harry Potter, that he's this very humble person who was just as much in awe of like the big set pieces and like the magical, because there are a lot of practical effects in the Harry Potter franchise, especially in the earlier movies. So you walk into like the Great Hall and it's just as majestic to stand in as it is on camera, on screen. So
Yeah.
he was just
and
that was a lot of how he experienced
his
the whole
humble
thing.
attitude was part of his charm and his appeal. I mean, to even imagine Robin Williams in that role, it would just become about Robin Williams. And
Right,
you could
yeah.
just feel through his performance as Hagrid that he was there making the kids comfortable, which is Hagrid's role too. I just he was you could feel his friendliness through the screen, and his intention, which was to be sort of a protector and this affectionate but giant hulking mass of a man. I mean, it's a great character, and I think he honored the character in the book. He's what people imagined, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Like the role of Hagrid is something that will forever be associated with Robbie Coltrane. And watching the behind the scenes stuff, it was kind of like Darth Vader in the sense that the performance wasn't just one person. He was the one doing all the work for when the close-up shots and like they see him talking, but then sort of some of the wide shots and when you don't necessarily need to see his face, maybe shooting from behind, they actually had somebody who's legitimately like the size of what Hagrid is meant to be, and even they put that person into like a big bodysuit to kind of like match the shape of what Robbie Coltrane would look like dressed up as Hagrid, and so it was a mix of both. It wasn't like they put him on stilts. Maybe on occasion they might have, but for the most part, it was like they had a body double for some shots, and then a lot of times they were shooting stuff where he's sort of pretending that Harry's standing next to him because they're shooting him in front of a green screen, or they're gonna shoot Harry
They're
Potter
doing
or
like
whatever other
forced
character.
perspective kind of stuff.
Yeah, like the forced perspective, yeah, or like straight up without even forcing it within the camera. Like,
Yeah.
maybe they talked about how using
Compositing.
different focal lengths of camera, you can kind of get away with it sometimes. It was like a dirty over the shoulder shot to like make the person in the background look further away and smaller. But sometimes they just simply had to do it as like a VFX shot with multiple plates. But at any rate, I mean, like you have to sit through makeup and everything for hours, and then you go and do all this work, and sometimes you're just acting against really like a green screen.
Yeah.
So, he was committed. And that wasn't. This is an image from the movie Buddy that he did back in the 90s. So again, he did a lot of other stuff that people don't really know about, and I think now that he's no longer with us, I think this is as good a time as any to go back and look at Robbie Coltrane's career as not just the person who played Hagrid, and obviously that's I think he's most well known for and will forever be known for, but he did a lot of other stuff. Like here's a picture from Cracker. This is him playing this very sly detective who had a lot of attitude to give out, but he was really good at his job. I don't even know if he was a detective. I think he was like a consultant. I mentioned in the pre-show
That is a consultant.
it was like
Yeah.
Castle almost, like like that show that ran on ABC for a while. He was kind of like the in-house consultant working with the police force, and like Helen Mirren's on the show. They had a lot of like big time like people who went on to become these big British movie stars started on these kind of shows. But he was a character actor. He never quite achieved like the same level of stardom as a Helen Mirren, but he also starred in a movie in the UK that this is James Bond, by the way, but like he started in a different movie where Tilda Swinton got her start. So, like you look at, I'm sure like people down in the years to come, they're going to go back and look at the filmography of all, some of these other actors, like I just mentioned the names of, and they're going to find Robbie Coltrane, Robbie Coltrane, Robbie Coltrane. You're like,
It's
oh my God.
interesting.
Like,
There's people
yeah.
who have had incredible careers, and they pop up all over the place in some of these fantastic movies, and you don't think of them as the huge, you know, celebrity movie stars, but every time they pop up, you're happy to see them, and then you look at their filmography at after a 30-year career or longer, and they've been part of some cultural moments, and they've been around. Steve Buscemi and Christopher Walken are two that come to mind, where it's just like every time you see them, it's kind of a treat, and you go back and you go, that I didn't even realize that they were also in this. But
Yeah.
going back a long time, those guys, these character actors who can convincingly bring somebody to life, like Hagrid, or I don't even know what I'm looking at here, but it's a completely different
He
person.
played a Russian mobster Zhukovsky in the
Yeah.
Pierce Brosnan
Wow.
iteration of Bond. So he was
Yeah.
first in GoldenEye, and then I think a couple of movies later in The World Is Not Enough, he came back again. He has a history with with Brosnan's Bond where they ran into each other in the past. Bond shot out his knee, so they sort of have this like at odds relationship, like a love-hate thing where they won't kill each other, but they will like they're not particularly friendly when they're in front of each other. Like literally in this scene, he like is shooting the couch where Bond is sitting around him just to kind of threaten him casually. and the
We're the
conversation just
adversary.
continues.
I love those relationships. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Well, as we've said here, we'll do a full-on tribute to Robbie Coltrane, as we've done for a lot of other great people that we've lost in the last year. Be sure to check some of those out. We call those Oh So Memorable, and we put a lot of heart and a lot of work into those, because we want to respect the legacies of these people who have become our friends through the screen.
Yeah.
I did have a question before we finish up, because
Sure.
it's in the graphic, and I did want to ask, what was your, I mean, and you could say Hagrid, because again, that was something that most everybody knew about, but what was your favorite Robbie Coltrane? Like, how would you remember him when somebody brings up the name Robbie Coltrane, how would you remember him?
I think this entire generation is gonna remember him mostly as Hagrid. We got these people who are they've read and reread Harry Potter 6,000 times, and they watch the movies religiously, and it's just he also did such a wonderful job with that character. I can't imagine anybody else being it not well.
Yeah, Roland?
Yeah, no, I definitely have to agree. Like that was how I was introduced to him. So of course, my first impression is always going to be like, oh, that's Hagrid. That's great. He doesn't have his beard or his hair or his giant stature, but that's Hagrid to me.
Yeah.
Even though he kind of submerges himself in these crazy roles before and after. So, but yeah, deep in my heart, it will always be that way. What about you, Dan? Are you feeling the same way? Kind of the
Yeah, I have to lean that way because again, I've seen him more as Hagrid than anything else. And it's like when the news came out. I mean, he hasn't been in good health for some time. Even when you look back at the recent reunion special that they did, Hagrid, well, call him Hagrid, Robbie Coltrane, he looked like he wasn't in great health, and he said something along the lines of, in 15 years, the great thing about Harry Potter is in 15 years time our kids will be showing it to their kids, and Hagrid will live on. I may not be around in 15 years, but Hagrid and the memory of that character will be. And, in hindsight, there's a certain, certain tragedy and it's poetic in a certain, and then, like you look at that and you tear up. But really, Hagrid was, like I watch at least one Harry Potter movie a year, right? Like everybody does. I mean, I feel like everybody does. But in any Harry Potter movie, I feel like if you don't see Hagrid, it doesn't feel like a Harry Potter movie. In fact, like one of the reasons why kind of sort of fell out of love with the franchise in its latter movies, like when they got darker and darker, was because you saw less and less of Hagrid, and then like there's a certain, like there was this charm to the character that Robbie Coltrane brought, which
Yeah.
and it's because of who he was as a person, not just who he was playing on screen. You watch some of the behind the scenes stuff, and like he's making everybody laugh. Like he's one of those people. He's in the room, you feel his presence, and he lights up the room. So to me,
And I think
that's why I remember him.
that's something that a lot of these
Yeah.
people that we do tributes to have in common is, their presence can be felt beyond the screen. And for some of these people, these big stars, they are the character, and then they stop, they cut, and that warmth doesn't necessarily stick around. It takes a special person to have that carry beyond, in between takes.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Bob Saget passed away. Like everybody who remembered him from Full House was like a collective. Like God, like not you maybe you call him America's dad, maybe you don't, but like it's like Hagrid felt that way. Like he was that person that everybody who grew up on these movies, like he could always rely on him. Like, there's a scene in Harry Potter where like so they first bring up the concept of mudbloods and Hermione's crying and Hagrid consoles her, and it's just like and then those kids back then, like I'm going to call them kids, like they're probably even older than us at this point, like the most of us at least, but yeah, like they were 8 and 11 years old, and when you're on a movie set of the scale of these Harry Potter films, like you're shooting for months on end, you're seeing more of the people you're working with on set than you are even your own family members. It's to have somebody like a Robbie Coltrane there, I think is wonderful, and that presence will be missed. So
Absolutely.
So
do we still have time to talk about She-Hulk?
we do, but before we do that, I did want to. We put together. I mean, we are gonna have an also memorable tribute for Robbie Coltrane in the coming days. But I put together like a really short little kind of like let's take a look back at who he was and the
Sure.
wonderful work that he did. So we could take a look at that before we jump into She-Hulk.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Today, we acknowledge a really terrible loss.
Who are you?
Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts.
Hagrid is bringing him.
Do you think it wise to trust Hagrid with something as important as this?
Ah, Professor, I would trust Hagrid with my life.
You ride with Hagrid.
I brought you here 16 years ago when you were no bigger than a bow truckle. Seems only right that I should be the one to take you away now. Hello, Harry.
Hi, Hagrid. Whoa!
Madden Harry? You wouldn't be talking about me now, would you? I remember when I first met you all. Biggest bunch of misfits I ever set eyes on. Happy birthday. Always you reminded of myself a little. Isn't he beautiful? Oh, bless him. Look, he knows his mummy. Hello, Harry.
Thanks, Hagrid.
I'd just like to say thanks.
I want it understood, Cornelius, that Hagrid has my full confidence.
Rubius Hagrid. Sorry I'm late. I got a real treat for you today. Yes! Harry? No! What are you doing here? These are seriously misunderstood creatures. Seriously misunderstood creatures. Spiders are. He's completely harmless, just like I said. Go on, I'm with you. I'm with you now. Harry.
There, Hagrid. It's not really goodbye after all.
I'll not be here, sadly, but...
There's no Hogwarts without you, Hagrid.
But Hagrid will. Yes.
This is a week we've been waiting for. This is the week that they have stopped making She-Hulk episodes. It's over. And this is the last time I have to talk about it, unless they bring her back for some reason, which I can't imagine they will. But Dan, Rolan, you both watched the whole show. And
It's true.
How'd it go? How'd it end?
I binge watched it. I know we've been doing week for week, so I'm caught up, and I have an opinion. But Dan, you've been bottling this in badly, but you've been bottling it in.
No. It's
Give it to us straight, Dr. Dan.
I was speechless like for a good 5-10 minutes after I finished watching it, because it was like, what the frack did I just watch? Was sort of like what my mind was thinking, and I was like basically speechless. I'm like, I really don't know what to think about this. And it wasn't even because I actually knew some of what was going to happen in the episode before I watched the episode, so it wasn't even like some of that was surprising. But even still, I was like,
what specifically was so baffling about it?
well, there's Kevin. Kevin was baffling.
What's Kevin? Who's Kevin?
You know what? Let me tell you exactly what Kevin is. Kevin is sorry. Knowledge enhanced visual interconnectivity Nexus. Yes, Kevin.
That sounds like it means nothing.
No, it's meant to be a stand-in for Kevin Feige, except apparently in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's meta fourth wall breaking and going onto the Disney lot version of Kevin Feige's office. Kevin is a robot, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh shit. Whatever. It's spoilers at this point. It's too late. I'll put it
I
out.
gave a verbal.
Yes, it's too late.
Or not a
But
verbal. I didn't give a
spoiler
verbal.
warning in case.
No, I did.
Why would
Whatever.
you want to take credit for this show?
Roland, I've been bagging on this show, it feels like, for the last 2 months. So how about
Has it only
you
been
give us
2
your
months?
thoughts? I have some thoughts
so
about
my
the overall
thoughts
season,
is-
but I'll sit back and watch what you have to say
Yeah.
or listen.
So here are my thoughts. First of
Okay.
all, Dan, you're ridiculous. That's my going thing. The show is fine. I watched it. It's adorable. I like literally that's all it is. It's this dumb, cute show. I explained it
dumb.
as like it's nothing to like really make your brain work.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's just something to put on. It's a sitcom without actually having to use the rules of sitcoms. It's having kind of like a story, and it's connecting things, it's having cameos, and it's whatever. And I don't know. It's kind of like, for me, it was almost like a superhero and TV-14 version of Fleabag, honestly. There's like some little like
Fleabag was such a better show.
no. Yeah.
Wasn't Fleabag
I
like
don't wanna
TV-14 anyway?
compare this to Fleabag because that's a totally different level.
Yeah.
But like it's
Unfair comparison beyond the fourth wall breaks.
yeah. But that's kind of like how it was just like it's just kind of like a peek. It's like a little nod, it's a little joke.
Sure.
And I don't know. I enjoyed it. Everybody's always giving it crap for like it's not having story, it's not doing this, or it's being too generic. Even though honestly, most of superheroes' upbringings and like how they're made is very generic. There's a formula. There's a formula for everything. You can only do so much, apparently, after being decades and decades in writing. And
Well, how many times have we brought She-Hulk to the screen?
I think it's the only time.
Yeah, and like you could do better, couldn't you?
Andrew, all right, why do you say that?
Because as we were discussing prior to this show, I just find that when you put politics into a show, or you try to politicize moments within a show, you cheapen it. You make it something that can really only exist in the time that it's being made. I think they flattened out a lot of characters, and I think beyond their treatment of men, I'm not fond of it all. The way that they brought back other heroes was kind of worthless, and honestly, it's been an exercise in mindlessness, as you said. Like there's nothing about this that would make me recommend it to somebody other than to maybe hate watch it one night.
And that's fine. It doesn't have to be for you. None of this has to be for you.
That's
I think
true.
we try to make a big deal about that.
Who's it for?
Personally, I thought it was dumb. It was fun. It was whatever. It wasn't something that I had to like really think about. Nothing was really nail biting. And there's a lot of things that they were trying to make relatable, even though she turns into a 8 feet, 7 feet, fighting green machine.
I guess that's what's so weird about it, is like they're trying to make it relatable, but clearly I'm not the audience for it. And yet MCU has always tried to be mass appeal for everybody. And it's like, okay, so who are they relating to? And it's like women who are in the same life situation or same position as, what's her name? Jen? Is her name Jen?
Jennifer Walters.
Jennifer Walters. It's like, okay, so you're in your 30s and you're trying to have a career and all men are terrible and, you just have all these other problems you don't want to worry about, and suddenly you're
not all men.
Let
me make that clear. Pug.
Who?
who's like
Pug
the one
is played
exception
by
to the rule.
Josh
To be fair,
Segarra.
But
He
to
is
be
awesome.
fair, that's like him and Bruce Banner are maybe the only two examples. Well, and then they bring in Daredevil, but all
And
of
her
those
dad.
people are like, well, other than Josh, like the other two
A
people are
loving
clear
parent
cameos.
relationship that is very rare.
I
in,
love that.
superhero.
But Miss Marvel had
Is
it.
it?
Miss Marvel had it. That was great to see.
Peter Parker had Aunt May and Uncle Ben. They're not his parents.
Yeah, but his
Again,
parents were dead.
good example.
Oh,
The
Good
one thing that
relationship.
that bothered me about the show more than anything was like, and Jessica Gao, who's basically like the lead writer on the show, she told Variety this in an interview after the show's finale aired this week, that this show is like literally a fuck you to toxic Marvel trolls. And and to be honest, I don't mind doing that. Marvel has always sort of liked to interact with their audience and like through their content. And it's sort of part and parcel of what the MCU has always been. That's not what bothered me. What bothered me was this show went out of its way to kind of focus around like the toxic culture. And I guess maybe
think-
my expectation going into a She-Hulk show was like I wasn't gonna watch a show that was trying to almost solely at times comment on how maybe the viewing audience is going to react to the show rather than telling a story that we can kind of immerse ourselves into. So I was never quite able to suspend my disbelief. Like, for example,
Well,
I
that's the
watched
thing
Top
with
Gun
fourth
this
wall
week.
breaks is that they're
Right.
a reminder that you
Not even
like,
not
real
even
life,
during the
there's
fourth wall
that
breaks.
wall.
Like that was what the show was doing all the time without even breaking the fourth wall. Like when they did it, it was more direct. But like for example, like the person who ends up being revealed as Hulk King, the whole idea of this dude. I mean, the idea that I know in real life there's examples of like these groups of people who sort of like kind of come together for their shared hate of, I don't know, in this case they generalize it to the point of we just hate females. That's how they refer to them, females in power. And I was like, the nuance was missing. You could make that same point in a
Yeah.
much more nuanced manner, and here it's like they had to like make it very in your face, like
I also
intelligentsia,
think it's
misogynistic
just
men,
disingenuous
females,
and it's
you know?
wrong to make a show with the intention, as she said, to literally be a fuck you to the audience. Like that's not entertainment. And
Personally, I've always been a fan of that kind of content, so that might be why we differ. My favorite endings are when the director almost just gives a middle finger to you. Like, I don't want to give some spoilers, but there's this movie called...
It can be done. It can be done.
Yes.
But this, this is a character people have wanted to see for a while, and clearly, if you're making this with the intention of putting putting off your audience, it's not the same thing as a choice to have a wild goose chase and something that doesn't make any sense and like a little giggle with a middle finger at somebody, but to produce an entire series just to kind of stir the shit, since we got the language warning up. I just think that's a bad instinct as an entertainer.
Yeah, and again, I would be okay if they were doing all of those things, but they weren't sidetracking themselves from telling a good story of the main character. Like, for example, there's a fourth wall break in this last episode where she says, where she's talking to literally, not even a fourth wall break, she's talking to Kevin, the knowledge or whatever nexus, whatever the EAV and I stand for. She's just telling him just this, just as I'm trying to just as I'm starting to settle in as being both the She-Hulk and Jen Walters, like all of a sudden now we get into this big finale fight sequence thing that the MCU likes to do with their shows, and I was like, I did not feel like that's where this episode was headed in the beginning in the first place. Like this was going to be a very character focused, because they sort of hinted at it, but then all of a sudden we're going in 5 different directions. And then to me, one thing that I really I would point this as a comparison. You watch a show which I believe is probably one of the best sitcoms to be made in the last decade, and that's Brooklyn Nine-Nine. which is got basically the same runtime per episode as this show. And as a sitcom, like it had the right pacing. Like everything moved quickly. They were able to get in subplots. They were able to have like an A story, B story, even a C story sometimes. And within 20 to 30 minutes, like you got something that felt like a full meal. And none of these episodes, especially this last episode, the way it ends, it's so non-conclusive. And I know Marvel shows have been doing this a lot, so it's not surprising, but it's incredibly frustrating when you watch the last episode of what could literally be the only season of the show we get if they want to take her to the movies or whatever that happens. Or even if we do get a second season, I'm like, there was no sense of satisfaction at the end of this episode because you didn't even like, and some of that is a bit nuanced. Maybe to some people, they were like, okay, she kind of at this point, this was her origin story and we get it. Now she's both She-Hulk and Jen Walters moving forward. But to me, that's not what it felt like. It just felt like, now she's going to another court case. We still didn't quite resolve the Hulk King storyline. She's going to now, like, basically the court case where he's going to get litigated and all that stuff that he did. But there was no conclusion to it. And the other thing
like
that I'm
that's
going to
part
point
of the
to,
formula.
Yeah.
no, but here's the other thing about the formula. Can I make a real? This is something
Yeah.
that bothered me because this is going to come back to bite Marvel in the ass down the road. They critiqued a lot of things that they themselves have done in their previous shows and movies, where like all of a sudden the last episode of the show becomes this big fight sequence and like big action set piece. But they here pointed at it and said that's not the right way to do things, and then changed it up, literally like plucking the Hulk out of the scene, changing the lighting, and like, you know, pointing to how the VFX budget, oh, the VFX artists have moved on to a different project. No, that's not how that shit works. And then we hear the Black Panther music. No, VFX are teams, like there's multiple VFX houses and they're usually working on multiple projects at the same time. Anyway, the point being, they pointed out a lot of these problems that they have themselves created for themselves before. And now that the audience knows that you know that you've done this stuff wrong, they're not going to spare you the next time you do that stuff again. So you're only making your life harder
That's
for
a good
every
point.
other MCU show going forward.
That's
You
a
know,
good
like
point.
that was bothering me too. Yeah, sorry, I'm big diatribe there.
Just to sort of take a step back here, I've noticed that a lot of the content about She-Hulk performs really well, and usually it's people, you know, shitting on it. And now that I have the context of what the writer said, this being a big fuck you to Marvel fans, toxic Marvel fans, you just created a whole imaginary demographic there. But you know,
well, there are toxic fans, and absolutely, like Star Wars, Marvel. But
don't even get me started. I'm just saying, it seems like the brand strategy behind this whole series was to troll. They trolled fans, they trolled commenters, they trolled us into making us talk about it, and they put objectionable things in there, like Megan Thee Stallion twerking and all of these,
which some people
ridiculous,
but not me.
Yeah, but I mean, anybody expecting a Marvel show and MCU consistency was probably triggered by this and trolled, and that's what this is. It's not self-awareness that brings you along for the ride. It's, as you said, it's a big middle finger to the audience and to people talking about it. And so I'd like to give a big middle finger back to it.
Literally or figuratively? I don't. Okay, I guess we're it's figuratively.
Well, like I said, we're all entitled to our own opinion. I personally think that they did a good job. I think the message came across, whether you understand it or not. It's up to you. But I think the whole point was they predicted that no matter what they do, no matter how thought-provoking it was going to be, there was going to be that group. There was always going to be hate. There was always going to be this.
Wouldn't that be like a small minority?
How well the main actor Tatiana did, which she did fantastic, by the way. She was incredible, super funny, very quirky, very witty. And I mean, they write this whole plot and kind of talk about like, hey, we understand you guys have been complaining about this and that, and there's a lot of problems that we're still working with. And it's just a very in-your-face way. If you're going to do a fourth wall break, no matter how sly you do it, it's in your face. That was always the whole point, when they were doing, plays where the fourth wall actually comes from, the actors would even kind of gesture toward the audience, literally being in your face almost. So I thought it was good. I didn't think it was the most thought-provoking thing, and that's okay. You can have dumb, fun content. You don't have to have these amazing things.
I'm glad you had fun. Dan, I think you thought it was dumb.
And can I just quickly add something to this?
Sure.
What you said, Roland, I understand that this is dumb fun and it's addressing no matter what they did, some people were not gonna like it or be trolls, troll the show. I get that, but that's always been and continues to be a very small maybe a vocal minority, but a minority nonetheless. And the problem that I have is when it's a vocal minority, by addressing it in such a central way to the premise and how every episode plays out in the show, what you're doing is you're giving them more of a platform than they ever had before. And they're going to troll you regardless. So by definition, you also realize that even if you did things the way you did it now, you're still going to get trolled. But only difference now is you gave them a bigger platform and a lot more meat on the bone to pull from, in a manner of speaking. It's that's why I always felt like the show should just tell the story that it wants to tell without doing it in a way that's literally always pointing to the fans who are going to troll the show or not like it simply because it's focused on a female-led superhero. I mean, I love Miss Marvel because it was an earnest story that did not do a lot of this stuff, and it was focused on a female character who had a very unorthodox origin story compared to every other Marvel character. And yeah, a lot of people did not like it. The show did not do nearly as well as some of the other Marvel shows. But you know what? To me, I look at that and say, well, that's just the society we live in, and we're going to progress over time. I don't look at that as a license to then go and give that vocal minority a platform and only make things worse, because I don't want to go into the whole I don't want to bring up any other analogies to other kind of things that happen in our lives, when whatever. I'm not even gonna go there. But the point being, we shouldn't be giving a vocal minority a bigger platform only to then continue, because they're gonna do what they're gonna do regardless. The only difference now is you made it more mainstream, and part of that is maybe their intent was, let's have a conversation about it and let's tackle it in a more mature way. But it wasn't cleverly written enough for me to start that conversation.
This is another exercise in the Ghostbusters reboot strategy, I think, of getting clicks, getting a bunch of negative publicity so that people have to check it out. And there was no negative marketing campaign for Miss Marvel. They earnestly put that out there and they said this is different. And it didn't do well. It's a matter of, are people gonna click on it and watch it? And rage gets clicks. So
yeah.
So I think that's the world we're in right now. Final thoughts? Do you think it'll come back? Do you want to see it come back? And yeah.
I think just to end it, to end it. This say what you want about the plot, but I was there for the characters, and I thought the characters were what I always came back to. I thought they were very funny. I love the relationships that were happening, especially with Jennifer Walters and her close circle, especially as she goes into the new law firm.
That was the fun part.
I liked enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So
Dan, one final sentence about what your final opinion on this is.
I just think they've commodified the Hulk and anything relating to the Hulk to the point where it's butchered to no end, and I really don't like that about the MCU at this point, because they're adding more Hulks before they can figure out how to get the CGI to the quality that the original Hulk had. Not to mention.
Gotcha. Well, maybe we'll get.
I'm not looking forward to more Hulk
style
content.
Show with all the Hulks in one big happy family. I certainly hope so. If you have something else that you're envisioning, if you like the show, if you hated the show, let us know. We'll talk about it. And if your comment is really compelling, we may even respond to it. So thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe and like and do all that other stuff in addition to the commenting thing that I mentioned just a moment ago. Now we're going to take a moment to look at episode 8 of The Rings of Power. I haven't been watching it, but some people on our team have, and here's what they had to say about it.
Come what may.
Come what may.
So, the Rings of Power finale. Yeah, Halbrand is Sauron. There it is. Big spoiler. I called it 3 episodes ago. It's a cool twist, but I saw through it. So my sort of conclusion with that one is that I wish they hidden it a little bit better. I wish it was less obvious that he is. I think this story would have served so much better if we had this WTF moment, like that no one suspected him being him. I'm glad the stranger is not Sauron. I'm just so glad that that was not the case, because that would have been weird. We still don't know who the 3 figures were. Obviously they had this Nazgul quality of a bad evil spirit, which I thought was really cool. And obviously Sauron and Gandalf, like all the wizards, are Maya, and then, you know, they're on the same level, and I suppose it was easy to confuse them. And yeah, it was an interesting twist. They weren't after to hurt him. Yeah, we got to see this shape-shifting quality as well. Like that's something I'm already thinking about, whether he's actually in his true form, you know, Halbrand, or whether he's, I don't know, in someone else's body. Like, what's his true visuals are like. Obviously we know him in his armor and, you know, like just smiting everyone, or like as an eye, but I wonder if that's actually Sauron, like if that's how he chooses to look like.
Okay, yeah, the stranger not being Sauron. You give the show the benefit of the doubt and think that they're gonna be a little bit more clever than just making him Gandalf, because at first glance, he does look like Gandalf. And I mean, we still haven't gotten confirmation that it is Gandalf. It could be any one of the wizards, except for, I don't think that it would be Radagast, because Radagast is tiny. And this dude's super tall. Yeah, it seems like it's hinting that it's Gandalf. And again, maybe it's another means to like subvert our expectations, and maybe it's not. It could be Saruman, or one of the 2 blue wizards. But I don't know if that would be one of them, because I don't think they have the rights to them. Or I don't know if they can reference them, but they can't use their names or something. They don't have the rights to their names. So I'm not totally sure if they could go that route. Most likely Gandalf, because, you know, again, from the beginning, we're seeing him being taken care of hobbits. He always said, I've always had a fondness for hobbits. I mean, it was kind of charming to see the way he changed and started talking to Nori at the end, and he sounds more like Gandalf. But it was just the fact that it was so obvious the whole time, and like, at least for me, I was like, it's so obvious, there's no way it's Gandalf. Like, I don't know if that's actually genius or really stupid. I don't know if that was even their intention. Like, if it is supposed to be Gandalf, did they really think that we weren't sure it was going to be him? Were we supposed to be thrown off and start guessing other things, and then we just come back to, oh, it actually is him, okay. And then, you know, you definitely know by the beginning of this episode that he's not going to be Sauron, because within 30 seconds, those 3 people, those 3 followers of Sauron are like, oh, you're our master. When you do it at the beginning of the episode, like, you know immediately, you're like, okay, so it's not him.
So Celebrimbor said something very interesting, which I think defines the whole series, which is, if there only was some way of doing more with less. And that's literally, they even said the words, which means the concept is not as far away from them. You know, doing more with less is a thing, and they should have followed that wise piece of information. Yeah, thanks Celebrimbor for waiting the whole series to share that with our creators. Less is more. Yeah, Elrond and Galadriel reunite. We had a little sweet moment. Halbrand was hurt when they arrived there. I didn't know I completely forgot how he got hurt. That was very confusing to me. And then confusion continued because he was almost dying in bed, and then a scene later, he's sort of walking fine and talking to Celebrimbor, and of course we know he's Sauron, so he probably heals better, but I just wish there was like a scene in between, something that would have given me a little break from those two events. Like, I really felt the pain of editing in the last episode. It was so inconsistent and so just not structured. There were like slow pieces with more like, I don't know, steadier pieces all mixed up, and it was confusing, and I swear there was just more to the story, or like more shots that we haven't seen. So if that's the case, I actually would love to see the director's cut of The Rings of Power, because what we're watching is just not enough. It feels like I'm missing some scenes. I mean, I suppose if you try to squeeze, you know, a lot into 8 episodes, that's what you end up doing. You end up providing some major plot holes. Yeah, it's not as enjoyable anymore.
It was very annoying how the show just kept kind of like winking at the audience with its hinting to where it was going, because, you know, it's like, oh, the audience already knows where we're going with this. Like, they talk about bonding the mithril with other precious metals to create some sort of item, right? And so first off, they're like, oh, we could do, it has to be circular. And then we're like, oh, do they mean a ring? And then they're like, maybe a crown would work. And then, you know, a little bit later, Halbrand talks to Galadriel, and he's like, oh, so we're actually making 2. And she goes, 2 crowns? And then he goes, no, we're gonna need something smaller. And it's like, it's just so cheap. Like, why are you, like, and he actually paused when he said it. He said, we're gonna need something ... smaller. Like, why are you taking a pause for this as if you are self-aware? Like, why is Halbrand self-aware that there's an audience watching this who knows that these are gonna end up being rings? Like, it's kind of like they're making a joke out of it, which, I mean, I would have appreciated it more if this whole show was a joke version of it, if that's what you're gonna do with it.
So one good thing about the episode, and I think this is probably why, or the reason why I kind of am glad that exists. Yeah, I'm glad to see the story of Halbrand, aka Sauron, and sort of his the insight into his mind. Like, we get to see like an inner psyche of a villain, and it's always really cool. You know, we know a ton of great villains, like really bad characters, but yeah, like seeing him being sort of so convinced in his own truth that what he's doing is actually for quote unquote good cause. You know, he kind of wanted to rule the world with Galadriel, and there was some goodness in that, in this whole master plan, but he's so evil that he cannot distinguish the moral good and the moral evil things. And I thought it was very interesting to have this insight into his motives and his desires and whatnot. Like, yeah, I think that's the strongest thing that saved this episode for me. Anyway, yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and make sure to check us out for our overall series review, which we'll be doing next week. Yeah. I mean, they're shooting the series, so there's more to come, but overall, the finale, meh. It had to happen. Every story has its ending. Whether it was a great ending, I will leave it up to you guys. I wouldn't sign it off as a good finale. It's definitely not a good finale. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Well, Halloween finally ended, and I'm joined by our resident horror expert, Rolan, and Michael Myers.
Eh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not the most sly joke, but I still went for it. You know,
I'm
you
glad
gotta.
he's here. Honestly, I prefer that Mike Myers to Michael Myers. If I had the opportunity to meet one of them, probably that one.
Yeah, I think we would all agree on that. So Andrew, how many Halloween movies have you seen before this?
Zero.
Zero.
Zero. I'd
Well,
never
we got the
seen.
language bar up, so might as well
Yeah.
say it. Damn.
Damn. Yeah.
Damn.
So yeah, I wasn't really familiar with it. I honestly, for someone like me who I like conceptual, like what are they called? Thrillers. Not I like, what do they call those? I'm blanking on the word. Psychological.
Are you trying to figure out
thrillers.
like what you like, or
No. I like psychological thrillers that, you're thinking about. I don't love gore.
okay?
And like my favorite horror movie this year was Cronenberg's movie. God, I suck today.
Oh gosh, what is it? Crimes of the Future.
Crimes of the
Yes.
Future. Like, that was beautiful to me.
Yeah.
I really like that. This, however, like I understand that this has been going on for a while. I like that they brought back Jamie Lee Curtis. She's a great actress. She's really good. The last thing I saw her in before this was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yes.
And like, what I really like about her is that she really is willing to play and honor the reality of anything she's in. Even if it's absurd. And there were moments of this that were absurd. What I liked about this is that it really wasn't so much about Michael Myers. I liked that they brought in this other character, and I liked him.
Yeah.
I don't know where they take this. I don't know if they're planning to take it anywhere. Does it really feel like Halloween has ended to you?
I think that to bringing in there's a new character that gets introduced who is an actor from the Hardy Boys, and it's very kind of like an 80s sequel vibe for me. But I think it was good way of showing that evil is a presence, it's a thing, and it's very much latched and connected to Michael Myers, but it's not necessarily Michael Myers, if that makes.
So I was a little confused by that.
Yeah.
Because there's a scene where like he meets Michael Myers underneath a bridge, and they sort of interface, and I think he pops in at certain scenes of crimes, and I'm like, so is Michael Myers, was he there? Was the evil present for those moments? Or are we seeing them sort of form a connection? What was your take on that?
So here's Corey, or that's the character's name at least. And honestly, I think it was just it was a really fun parallel to see Corey's relationship with Laurie's granddaughter, because it was kind of like Halloween Next Generations. They're connected, not necessarily by the same trauma, but a trauma in its own type thing.
Yeah, well, that's actually an interesting point, because generationally we carry our parents' trauma to a certain degree because they had their issues and that affected how they raised us. And that is an interesting point to consider when we see this.
I mean, these are two people that have grown to hate Haddonfield, the town they lived in, which was such an amazing idea that they brought in Halloween Kills. It's always really been Michael and Laura, it's Jamie Lee Curtis's character and Michael Myers. And it's always been that way. And then even with Halloween, when they kind of, I guess, redid it, it was always that way. And then we get Halloween Kills, where they like introduce the town mob, and just kind of have this like surrounding, like they all fucking hate this guy. Like, excuse the language, but they can't stand this.
Well, I also really liked that as she's walking out of the market, that woman who is also a victim starts talking about like she has anger directed at Jamie Lee Curtis's character, which feels very small town, which feels very much like, yeah, that they're actually expanding upon the reality. I know I was saying I hate world building, but this is another elegant use of it where you're expanding the story in a sensible, realistic way that follows from the details that we're given to start with. And that was really neat to see. I noticed
that wasn't some just random person that was in the chair, just so you know. That was actually like a kill that Michael had in the movie prior.
That's what I figured. That makes sense. I also noticed Danny McBride was one of the writers here. And not everybody knows this, but as funny as the guy is, he grew up loving horror and got into the industry just being a fan of horror and thinking he was going to do mostly horror. He's done a lot of other scary, but also funny, scary things.
Like This Is the End, I feel like very blends that line.
There's more. I mean, it's worth diving into his filmography to see not what he's acted in, but what he's written and directed.
What he's just like worked a part of. Alien Resurrection, or no, it wasn't Resurrection. It was Covenant, I think, where he was. I believe he was a writer as well, as long as he was acting too in it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, with somebody who has such a love of those classic 80s horror, like that's who you bring into like a reboot or into a sequel, is somebody not who just saw it or like can expand the characters, or like was attached to this project and so maybe we should get him for this. This is somebody who he could feel something beyond the characters and the details and say, this is what 80s horror is. And I did get an 80s horror vibe from this whole movie, which I gotta hand it to him. That's hard to do because, in my opinion, Stranger Things doesn't do that.
Very much so. It's 80s, but it's not the vibe, you know?
Yeah.
As somebody that's kind of getting to the slashers, I guess, how did you feel about that very first scene? What were your initial thoughts? Did you predict what happened? Because that's a good opening. That is an opening.
It's funny because, the way they set it up, it felt very much like one of the Scary Movie openings. And I was like, I couldn't take it seriously at first. But, they get that shot of the staircase and how it spirals up further and further. And I was like, oh, that's ominous. And, when I sort of accepted that it wasn't going to be Michael Myers showing up in the first scene, and that I was just going to have to sort of get into this, I was shocked by the result there. And it actually made for a pretty good time jump to the next year where people are divided over whether or not he intentionally killed this kid, or if he really did just have a hard time. And either way, people treat him terribly. And it's interesting because it comments on people today who like get canceled, or like people only get certain details of a story. And yet in the small town, you either subscribe to this version of the story, in which case he's evil, or you get this other side of the story where it's like, yeah, he had a tough break and now he's just kind of stuck here like the rest of us. And it was a smart dynamic, I gotta say.
That small town gossip gets lethal. I mean, as we can see, I mean, this got bad. But I do like what you said earlier about how like this is a town, like this is very much a small town, and like Jamie Lee Curtis does like a good job of, in my opinion, just kind of being this like, I don't know, almost this grandma. Like she's like light and cheery, kind of has this like flirtation going on with one of the police officers, and then immediately is hit with that shopper outside, just kind of like this grief that will never let go, no matter how much therapy and stuff that she does for herself, the town will always remember.
I will say I was amazed by this woman's collection of kitchen knives.
I know. You would
Just
think
like,
like at
open
some
a
point
drawer.
she'd be
Here's a
like,
knife. And like, use that one. Where's my other knife? And it's like, she's got more. It's like
yeah.
clown pulling out knives. It was a it was a knife-a-palooza. A lot of knives in this. And then another interesting thing is like, what's the main guy's name? The character?
Corey.
Corey. So there's gore in the movie, but
Yeah.
not all of the gore is the horror and the violence, because he has to get his hand stitched, and the practical effects of like getting the suture in there and the like, I was like that's the gore. I was totally misdirected into that. But it's like it's an inversion of the genre to be like, yeah, there's also this really unsettling thing that really does happen to people, and it's like to fixate on that. It's a different element of horror. That it's like, so bottom line, no, I don't have the appreciation for this as somebody who's only seen this movie. I didn't get the full payoff. But having said that, like, I think they put together a quality movie here.
Yeah. How did what are your thoughts of the ending? Did you think it came to like a decent close? Did you like that final battle?
Yeah, I don't know the mythology about, how he keeps coming back or like what his powers are or anything like that. If anything, it feels like they've left it open to where like Corey could sort of carry the torch.
Honestly, I mean, he was definitely like giving. It was kind of like it said in the movies. It's in the eyes. He's lost in this evilness that's like almost no going back. And then the more he kills, just the more powerful. And I liked how it kind of foreshadowed this throughout the movie, because like you get to a point of like, how is this kid not dead?
Yeah.
Just things keep happening, which is something that is always said about Michael Myers. Like, how is this guy not dead? How does he keep back? How does he keep jump scares? Which just kept happening with this. And it kind of got to a point of like, you look back at it and you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I see this happening? Like,
yeah,
the signs.
I also have to say, like, there's certain things where like people get stabbed or like murdered, and there's like one woman who gets like stabbed into a wall and she's just kind of hanging there. And at a certain point I was like, man, murder is something that only happens in movies, and if it happened to me, I'd probably survive it. Like, there was so much murder in this. I was just, that's the thing that's the attitude that this movie gave me about murder. It's like, yeah, I'd probably survive murder, because it's always happening. It's it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say that shot of her getting put in the wall. Two things. One, it's this beautiful recreation of like from the first movie where Michael pins this guy to the wall and just looks at it almost like it's a painting, Like that's honestly the vibe it gives. But also, if that same knife can go through somebody and stick them to the wall, then why in the hell did it not kill Corey earlier when he was holding that guy and Michael was like stabbing them?
Yeah, and so it's like what is the magic here? And maybe that's deliberately made obscure so that like we're guessing, and it's like it's scary and we can't predict it. Also, like, fans who understand how certain magic works, they write all kinds of theories about like why this actually doesn't. They find plot holes. So maybe it's strategically that makes sense. Do you think that this is going to be a reboot? Do you really think that it's over? Maybe Jamie Lee Curtis's involvement is over.
I think that with this timeline, I hope it's done.
Really?
Just because this is the way to end it. Please, like, Michael is died many a times, and they bring him back, and it's just like, this is a good way to do that initial timeline. It's okay to say goodbye. You can do other things with a different timeline, but what?
So you think that they'll reboot it with Michael
I know
Myers
for a fact
again?
that they'll reboot it.
I know for a fact.
I know for an utmost universal fact that in 2 to 3 years' times, we'll get to see like plans for development of like a new something. because that's just how it goes. But
That's gonna be tough because I mean, usually with that, with a reboot like that, they change the look of things. They change details about the story. So tall order, but you know,
who knows? They might
probably
even change the Captain Kirk mask. It might even be like a
Is
more.
That what that is?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah.
No, you're. So basically, how the mask came to be. Little fun trivia fact.
Please.
Is back in 1977 or whatever year it was. They were looking for like cheap masks. They found this Captain Kirk mask that was just like, it was like latex, it had hair, and they were like, this, we can do something with this. All right, let's tweak this. So they took off the sideburns, they sprayed the hair brown, like they were able to dye it and just kind of like fixed it, combed it all the way back instead of that side part that he has, and they just like spray painted it white to give it a more ghostly feel.
Okay, but it's not like they wrote that into the movie or anything, like Michael Myers.
No. Yeah, that's just like, it's just like a mask. Yeah.
Interesting.
But,
yeah, because I was wondering what the story is behind that and what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to end this, Andrew, do you think that you'll go back, you'll watch the original Halloween or the first Halloween of this trilogy? Do you think you'll continue the slasher?
I honestly, I don't think I'll go back and watch all of them.
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
I think at
Please
some
don't.
point, yeah, I think at some point I'll watch the original, and if that gets me interested in more, then I'll follow it up. But for having said all of that, this was not a bad movie. And I think it was a respectful end to a long legacy. So we'll see. Tell us what you think if you saw it. If you're looking forward to seeing it, you can watch it on Peacock, or you can go to theaters still. In the meantime, follow us, comment, like, subscribe, do all the stuff. And we'll be back next week talking about other movies and things. Yeah. I hope to see you there.
Next up, Andor.
Oh, yeah. Andor. Let's see what we have to say about that.
Yes, let's address the elephant in the room. My hair is pink. Moving on. Under episode 6, we have the heist. We finally get to see the heist, and it's good. I just can't believe I got to see an episode of Star Wars on Disney Plus, which felt like a good heist movie. I wouldn't compare it to ocean films, but the level of tension and sort of build up leading up to the first, second, and then third act of the heist, it just felt like an orchestra. Like it felt like every piece of instrument came in at the right time, at the right pace, and it was really nicely done. I can't remember last time I was so nervous and excited. I still can't believe they pulled it off. It started a heist that they're going to steal guns. I completely misunderstood that. So they actually were stealing the crates of payroll. Please forgive me. I completely misunderstood that. It was actually 40 million bucks, I think, something like that. They kept saying 40 million Imperial credits. So yeah, big money. So Ibn Moss Backrack, who plays Skeen, he's that kind of actor that I just kept seeing everywhere, and I really didn't pay attention to him. And right now, I see him everywhere. He stars in this brilliant series called The Bear. If you haven't seen it, make sure to check that one out. But yeah, here he plays Skeen, who, spoilers, turned out to be in this only for money. He's been lying all the time, and Cassian killing him, it took me by surprise, but at the same time, we know Cassian is not this archetype good hero of the story. Yeah, not many people survive that heist, but we'll get to that. They shot all Aldani sequences in Scotland, and yeah, make sure to go to Scotland for the locations if you're into it, because they were astonishing. I love how costumes look like they all have been lived in, and they're dirty, they're not perfect, they actually look like it's something that men would make. And great script, great acting, and costumes are like just a cherry on top, amongst many other things. But yeah, see what I did there? I tried to connect those 2 points. And anyway, moving on. I found it very interesting how the Empire started having discussion about the psychological manipulation they did on Dani's. It sort of showed what Empire is like and how they actually managed to rule galaxy, and how, Palpatine managed to convince everyone. Like, it's sort of like a nice little insight into the Empire, something that the new trilogy, the Force Awakens and all that, they didn't manage to actually capture. You have to have certain level of persuasion and manipulation in order to rule the world. They actually did have brains. It's not all about manpower and how many of them are there. There takes some thinking and strategy into getting what they want. Again, very believable, very realistic, made you actually consider and think of the Empire and their motives for a second. Speaking of Empire, it was actually very interesting to find out that, hey, we hadn't had a stormtrooper who was a deserter. Of course, they had to have some deserters in order to have that sort of insight into how the Empire operates and stuff. And yeah, I'm glad Finn wasn't the only one, that we get to see more stormtroopers, more officers, and more people that left Empire and sort of switched the sides. We get to see the Empire's households even, their mothers and wives and children and stuff. Again, like, nice little insight to see what their motives are, what sort of games they are playing, that they're all sort of trying to survive, really. And I'm not saying it absolves the Empire from the crimes, but it does make them feel more human. They're not just big bad guys on the screen, running after our heroes. They actually are just fulfilling orders. And yeah, this series is about people, and I'm so happy it's not just about the innocent people, it's also about the Empire and, I don't know, a little bit of justice. Why not? Bad guys can be can have lives. I like that we're not with Cassian Andor every step of the way, even though the series is called Andor. We're just Andor. But yeah, it makes it more spectacle what's happening at the same time as the heist. Wow. Visuals were just breathtaking, and their escape through the meteor shower or whatever that was, like, mind-blowing. It was very beautiful and stressful to watch at the same time. Completely paid off. I absolutely love the cross-cutting scenes between the heist and this religious celebration of the eye, performed by the Danis. I thought it was very nice. So Star Wars tends to overwhelm you with action. You have a lightsaber fight, you have Luke saving Vader, and then you have a very nice sort of depth to Star Wars, something that just does not happen very often. It was a very wholesome scene. Both the Dani and the Empire officers were both witnessing the spectacle in the sky, the eye, the meteor showers, and I don't know, it just showed this sort of unity between the two. So even though they're completely different people, completely different power hierarchies and stuff, they were both there collectively witnessing this nature event that, I don't know, it was very interesting to see. Like, we don't get to see the bad guys and the good guys witnessing something that's outside of their power. And I'm so glad that they actually had guts to kill off the majority of the main characters. Something that it's so rare nowadays. Everyone's too scared to touch the precious lead characters. And yeah, I mean, we lost Nemec, we lost Skeen, we lost the stormtrooper guy, we lost the officer. The girls survived, which is good. Vel is good. But yeah, Hera and Andor clearly will go their separate ways, at least for now. I'm so happy they're not scared of taking those cuts, taking those losses in order to, you know, progress with the story and still stay relevant, make space for more. Really cool episode, looking forward to next week. And yeah, thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and yeah, may the force be with you.
Next time on Oh So Curious, we're going to talk about Black Adam. And there's some rumors that beyond this being a rock fest, we may actually get our old Man of Steel back, Mr. Henry. You say Cavill or Cavill?
Cavill.
Cavill.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, as a diehard fan of Man of Steel, are you excited to see him come back?
Yes, I am. I mean, yes. Now the thing is, from what we know so far, it looks like he's only going to be in a post-credits scene. And the warning, spoiler warning, in case you haven't figured this out on your own, or along the lines of that you know, that one cameo or that one appearance that we've been looking forward to. All I'll have to say about that is welcome home. And you know, it's been long overdue, and like they kind of had this conversation. Jimmy Fallon was more or less just teasing him, but because you know these they're gonna probe, right? Everybody wants it's up to the actors to kind of like give away details. It seems like The Rock is like very much like in control of a lot of like what he's able to dish out or not dish out, and he's made it no secret at this point that Henry Cavill is back. And now, before we even kind of talk about that, because that's big. That's big. There's implications of that we can talk about in detail. I wanted to kind of throw it back to you guys and like this movie, the character of Black Adam. A, like, are you guys familiar with the character? And B, are you at all excited to watch the movie for what it is? Because Henry Cavill's, if he does show up, he's showing up right at the very end after the credits. There's a whole movie that plays before that. So I mean, what is your interest level?
Isn't it weird that like we're looking forward to the post-credit scene already?
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, there's something to be said about that. Certainly the marketing, and I think it goes to show maybe that's an indication of they need to put this out there rather than having it be a straight surprise to bring more people to the theaters, because I don't think they were as confident in the ability of this movie to kind of come out the gates.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think a lot of people are like totally unfamiliar with this, except for people who know the comics or who they're familiar with DC and how everything interconnects there. You know, for some reason, and I honestly don't know what it is, our culture is like captivated with The Rock. I've never really understood that.
You're not a WWE guy?
Honestly, he hasn't been for a really long time. You know?
It's been like a decade almost. He makes a few appearances here and there, but the last run he had was like 10 years ago. He's pretty much
just an actor now. And you know, I forget what movie it was, but like a show about his life, and he was Crypto, the super dog, and he's in comedies and he's in buddy cop movies, and like I'm just like, what's compelling about him? Is he a fantastic actor? Is he really, really funny? Do women think he's really attractive? Are we afraid that he's gonna beat us up if we don't like him? Is my real question here. Like, I don't know. I'll see the movie, but I have no prior interest in Black Adam. I have no particular affinity for The Rock, who seems like a really great guy. He seems like a nice dude. But I don't know. Is this movie for me? I don't think so. Roland?
I think even if you aren't like a fan of the comics or not even a fan of Dwayne Johnson, I think there's the visual effects on this just looks amazing, which can't really be said for every Marvel project right now. You know, this definitely took a little bit more time, but we're seeing some good results. I'm seeing a lot of like really cool shots that, and like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I get a kick out of it.
it does. You know what? It does look impressive. I like the idea of an anti-hero. I could I could convince myself that I want to see this and that it looks, because it does. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
And the Atom, like that's, I like the Atom. I didn't know the Atom was going to be in this.
The Atom
really
Smasher.
Oh, that's the Atom Smasher.
The Atom Smasher?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's played by Noah Centineo. Remember that guy? He used to be in everything. There was like a certain year that guy was in he was always in casting announcements and stuff like that. But
the name sounded familiar. I don't think I've seen him in a whole lot of things. I
think if you see his face, you'll be like, oh yeah, that guy.
Well, no, I saw the face looks familiar. I couldn't connect him to a particular role. That's I mean, maybe, but you know, what I've watched is probably not what he was.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting about this is, like, we've had all these talks about the change-ups at Warner Brothers and Discovery, and there's been talks about, like, how do we make the DCEU compete with Marvel? Dwayne Johnson recently said, we're not trying to compete with Marvel. We're not trying to be Marvel. We're trying to be our own thing. A good move in terms of something to say in a press release. Do you really think that this doesn't look like a Marvel movie? How will we know that this doesn't feel like a Marvel movie when we go see it?
Marvel and DC have always had a different feeling, no matter like how early you go. There's always been this divide, and Marvel is, I think, as we've previously mentioned in this episode, was kind of like it's usually for all audience. You know, it's almost got like this family friendliness to it. Yeah. You know, it's a little more comedic. And DC has always been like more interested in story developments and characters and unraveling these like crazy things, and honestly not afraid to be a little weird with it and be a little dark with it. And
yeah, the darkness is something that I definitely that definitely resonates with me. Dan, do you think there's any other elements to this that like will make this stand apart from every other superhero movie we've seen recently?
Well, I'll just say this. I've been scrolling through the pictures for the last few minutes, and I'll kind of go back through the roster. For the first time in, I think, cinematic history, live action cinematic history, we're getting a portrayal of the Justice Society, or I don't know if they're going to call it the Justice Society of Americas, but we know they call it the Justice Society, which was the precursor in the comics to the Justice League. They're the very first superhero team in comic books history. So you got Hawkman, you have Cyclone, obviously we talked about Atom Smasher. The character I'm most excited about is, of course, 007 James Bond, Mr. Pierce Brosnan coming in and taking over the role. The first live-action portrayal ever of Dr. Fate. And the internet's been rife with comparisons with Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Go back to that picture of him for a moment. Like, how can you have that, even as a screenshot? The character's name is Dr. Fate. How can you say you're not trying to compete with the MCU by putting him in a movie, giving him the goatee, and that very, very similar costume played by
I'm glad you walked into this. Roland, how about you?
I will say the goatee, that's amazing point, Andrew. That's a good point. That's funny.
Squinty British man, too.
But okay, Roland, you wanna address like why the comparison is maybe not entirely fair?
No, it's absolutely fair. Dr. Fate and Doctor Strange were another example. It's the whole man thing and swamp thing again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many instances of this happening.
Well, I mean, what I mean is though, like okay, again, there's Namor coming this year. We have Aquaman and DC, but like in this case, Dr. Fate has been around in the comics a lot longer than Doctor Strange. Obviously, to the average person, they're gonna connect this to. Is this Doctor Strange for DC?
This is a real Mr. Pibb, Dr. Pepper thing for me. Like, it's
fair.
It's the same soda.
Definitely different story. Totally different story. For Dr. Fate, he doesn't have magic powers until he puts on the helmet. And then he's like possessed by the spirit, and then he has these magic powers. But
which actually feels a lot more like Shadow Knight. Not
Shadow Knight.
Moon Knight, excuse me.
Moon Knight.
I feel like there was a Shadow Knight too, somewhere.
Shadow Knight was
Shadow Knight definitely sounds like something that's out there.
That exists.
I'm a
It
Google
is out there. I just realized why. I play Shadow Knight in a kid's cartoon.
Spoilers.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Moon
Shadow Knight is coming up as Moon Knight, so
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
for some reason I don't know. Oh,
The point I was trying to
It's an
make though is, the JSA, the Justice Society. I think that's gonna be something very fun to watch. That dynamic, and this is obviously they're starting out with only a subset of characters, but they're going to add to this roster, I hope, over the like the coming movies and whatever. But I like the look of Dr. Fate. Honestly, I think the character design in general looks, I mean, in live action at least. I think in the comic books, Doctor Strange looks better. But as far as the live action iteration so far, I'm liking the look of Fate better than Strange. That's just me. There's a little bit of confusion with Atom Smasher. Because I think they almost, in the Zack Snyder's Justice League, they do basically hint at or introduce the person who ends up becoming the Atom in the comics. He's like one of the scientists at the Crash Kryptonian ship lab, like Star Labs scientist. I've never seen. I didn't even know what character like Cyclone was until I'm like, okay, well, cool. I'm sure she's a great. I haven't even seen anything that Quintessa Swindell, I think is her name, has been in. But I'm excited to see that she's the only female member of the team, which is curious. Hawkman.
I will say the look of these images, it feels a lot more like Greek myth, kind of. I mean, like the lighting on this stuff, they look like Renaissance paintings. I mean, they are like, it's a different feeling for sure, because Marvel tends to feel a lot more like, candy. It's, candy with a lot of depth and like exciting stuff, but it's like real in your face, bright, colorful, a lot of movement. This feels like hardcore action. I think they're leaning into that Dark Knight sensibility where they're going to try and bring it into the real world and make us believe the reality, even though, it just feels kind of mythic.
I like I mean, like The Rock is built like a superhero. He's not wearing any padding. This is just him, and they just put like a layer on top. That's it. I like he doesn't have to go very far in terms of as an actor to kind of portray the character that he's playing, because more so than a lot of characters he's played over the years, in this character he can sort of be himself, but like heightened a little bit more. He can float and he can do other things. But I like that. I mean, I'm not gonna watch this as an Oscar contender, but I will I'm gonna try to enjoy it for what it is. That's how.
Honestly, I like that he's not gonna try and charm me with a bunch of jokes in this. That's probably my.
Yeah, he's ripping people's arms off. That's what he's doing in this movie.
He's not here to make me laugh, and that's fine. Well, you know what? We'll see it, and we'll talk about it, and hopefully, if you're watching this and you're planning on seeing it too, you can join the discussion.
I know we skipped over it early. I'm sorry, don't mean to cut you off, but can we have a mini conversation about like what is the implication of Henry Cavill coming back as Superman, Man of Steel?
I mean, we can, yeah. It's like, I don't know. Here's my take on it. They said they were going to reboot the DCEU. They were going to try and
Nobody
do
said
all these new things.
It wasn't ever officially said.
There were rumblings, and they were talking about like, well, there's new shakeups at the company, and so we got to figure out what we're going to do with this.
They said there's going to be a new 10-year plan. They didn't say they were rebooting anything. You
know what? It doesn't look like my 10-year plan for DC. I was ready for a new Superman personally. But hopefully they give him an opportunity to what a lot of people think, to the opportunity to right the wrongs of how they've treated this character in the last 10 years. I think it's, I think we could use a new Superman. We've had so many new Batmans in the last decade. And I'd like to see more of a classic take on him personally. That's me.
I mean, you don't have to change the actor to do that. You could just make a new movie that kind of feels more in line with the 70s.
That's true.
I'm excited, honestly. It's a post-credit scenes if you were to believe the rumors and everything The Rock has said, and if I mean, I have not seen the leak scene online myself, but if you have, I guess that confirms it. So we're gonna be reviewing the movie next week, so we'll watch it regardless of whatever you think about it. I'm excited. I don't know if you guys are. I mean, Andrew, you've made it clear.
I mean, yeah, I'm excited.
You know what? I'm warming up to the idea. I'll see it and I'll tell you what I think. You guys go see it. You tell me what you think. Anybody watching, same deal. We'll meet back here next week, and we'll talk about it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to all the Oh So Curious content. I'll be back later with some House of the Dragon stuff. We're covering all kinds of shows, Lord of the Rings, Andor. We're here talking about stuff, and we will be back. We'll see you then.
Okay, so let's talk about this thing. The Sauron reveal was pretty obvious. Did we finally get to see any rings of power? I'm on episode, I think I finished episode 4, so I'm about halfway there, but the two of you finished the show, so did we? Because they weren't even hinting at a ring. We were just talking about the, what do they call that thing that makes the rings? That's all I remember.
Mithril.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's what they make the rings with, right? Like I'm talking about, like, what do they call it? The kiln or whatever they're trying to build.
Forge or something.
The forge, yes.
The forge.
There must be a
right.
kiln in the forge, but yes. Anyway, so you know how far behind I am, but I spoiled myself many times in terms of, like, I know basically what happens, and it's not like, it doesn't seem like a lot of it is unexpected. They're kind of following like what the books say, or however much the books do say, at least. So the question that I had for you is, you've been reviewing the show for the last, what is it, 7 weeks? They put out 2 episodes together. Yeah, 7 weeks. So let's say like 2 months. And so the Rings of Power, season 1 is now complete. So let's start by just kind of getting your initial, summary thoughts on how the season played out. And Mags, we can kind of start with you. What did you think about season 1 of the Rings of Power?
Oh, meh. I mean, I really like. I was going to ask you, like, do we have permission to spoil it, since you're like, you haven't finished it yet? But I know it's pretty, as you said, it was way too obvious. And I liked, A for effort. They really tried to make it enjoyable, but I mean, we can go into the whole list of reasons why it didn't work. Like, from lousy screenwriting and to editing to rolling R's that I'm sure we'll get into. Like, it was. I mean, in our halfway in our halfway season review,
like mid-season review.
Sort of mid-season review.
That's what we call it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry. We sort of mentioned it, like, it actually would have been fine if they just didn't call it The Lord of the Rings. If they were just like a standalone fantasy series, I think they just raised the expectations of fans, essentially, and they couldn't deliver based on that. But yeah, that's what I think. It's a shame. It's a real shame, given the budget, for sure. But yeah, Catriona, what about you?
I mean, obviously the same. Like, I'm in the same.
I don't know, maybe finale has changed your your view on the show. No,
I was only happy because I knew it was the last one, so I was so done. I tried to feel something for somebody in the show, and there were moments where I was like, oh, I guess, if things had been done correctly, I could have felt something, but I just didn't. And
yeah,
I felt like we were just being cheated, and it felt like, as an audience, like, it's like, it just felt like they thought we were so dumb that they didn't really need to try that hard, and that we should still just like it, and it's
less,
like you said,
less is more. right?
Yeah, yeah.
Something that they should have followed. Like every scene was trying to be super epic, and there was no need. It could have been done
No.
much simpler. Yeah.
It was like it's weird because it's like there's a level of it that felt like it was trying to be more epic than it should have, and then at the same time, it wasn't epic enough. You know, I was thinking like the moment where we reveal that Halbrand is Sauron, and then the whole leading up to the creation of the rings, and like that whole montage of making the rings is cool, although I do think the rings look like they were bought at like Claire's or something. But
That's what I mean. I specific about the ring. I rewatched the epilogue of the Lord of the Rings, you know,
Yeah.
when Galadriel gives you the whole background, and she talks about the 3 elven rings and stuff. I watched that and I was like, those rings look so much more powerful. They look so tacky and cheap.
I know. And
yeah,
I was just thinking like I didn't rewatch that scene from the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, but I was thinking about it and just remembering every time I'd rewatch the Lord of the Rings and how it felt. What was epic about it was the mystery behind it, and being like, wow, that must have been such a cool time to live through, and how crazy and dark everything must have been. And then to watch the reality of it, I mean, it's not the reality, but it's Amazon's reality version, and it just felt like they downplayed everything, and they ruined the mystery and the epicness of it, which made me feel like, what was the point of it if you weren't going to make it feel as cool as that 5-minute?
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And we've tried it. That's what I mean. We actually we kept saying this, we lowered our expectations enough that we gave it a shot. And the first episode was actually somewhat enjoyable. And Dan, because you're quite fresh still, like, I know you see the problems with it, but I know you genuinely like it because it's well done. Like, it's well done stylistically. It's polished. Yeah.
Well, I mean, given the amount of money they were putting into it, and the trailers, like, it was pretty obvious the show was always going to look good. Some of the things that I really liked about the show, and, you know, I'll address your critiques too, but some of the things that I really liked about the show, and then again, I have only seen half of the season so far. So, although that's technically not true, because since I've sort of been involved with the review editing process and uploading and everything, so I've seen like parts of episodes 5 to 8, but in general, I feel like what they did well was they did not overuse CGI. And then when they did use CGI, it was used well, and then all the CGI looked good. Like, I actually ended up over the last couple of months spending a lot more time than I probably should have watching She-Hulk. Certainly more time than I've spent watching this. Actually, to be fair, the 4 episodes worth of runtime of Lord of the Rings of Power is probably equivalent to like all 9 episodes of She-Hulk anyway. But having said that, I really did, you know, that show has CGI issues where like the quality of the CGI literally varies from scene to scene or shot to shot within the same scene even. In this show, it just, whenever you had CGI, I mean, so you could really, because, you know, hey, humans can kind of tell, like, clearly they did not shoot that for real. So you can kind of tell where the CGI is. I mean, there are obviously scenes and shots where the CGI is just hidden because of how well it's done. But even when you notice, like, you know, when the show Numenor, like with these big sweeping shots and like the boats or the ships coming in, and or like, you know, when they're on the ships and you're seeing them on the deck, like pulling rope and stuff and putting the sails up and whatever. And you could tell like parts of the ocean are obviously like, you know, the horizon line and everything, all that CG. It was done really well. So I really appreciated the execution of the CGI, and I think they didn't overuse it because like for some of the costumes and stuff, it just felt like.
Speaking of CGI, Dan, do you know where you could really appreciate the CGI? Or I was most impressed with how they did Balrog. Like, Balrog was, it felt Peter Jackson Balrog, but at the same time it had very nice polish to it, and it completely made me believe that creature like this exists.
Yes, and that's, I think, simply because, what was it, how long has it been, like almost 2 decades, not really 2 decades, but like a decade and a half since the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. of films were released. So the amount of progress we have made in terms of what CGI today can do versus what it can do back then, you go back and watch. I mean, those Lord of the Rings movies, I never watched, and this is where I'm the novice in the franchise. I've still to this day not seen the entirety of the original trilogy. I've even only just seen parts of the Hobbit trilogy, which overused CGI. That was like if Peter
Yeah.
Jackson's original trilogy was like the original Star Wars trilogy, The Hobbit was like the Star Wars prequel trilogy in terms of
Yeah.
how heavy they went in the other direction.
I felt
But
nauseous after seeing it at the cinema. I came out of there. I'm
yeah,
like, I feel like I'm gonna be sick. Not because
and
of
it
how
got
bad it was, but because it was just so much.
right. It was
Yeah.
too much. And but I will say this, even though the original Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy gets a lot of praise for not overusing CGI and then doing a lot of miniatures and stuff, simply because, the technology just wasn't there, or at least it would have cost way, way more money than they even ended up spending to have way more CGI than they
Yeah.
actually had. But like to me, that Lord of the Rings CGI from back in that time does not hold up nearly as well today, because in some scenes you could just tell they're trying to hide some of like the limitations of the technology that they had available to them by shooting certain, especially the large scale scenes, in a certain way,
Yeah.
and like color grading them in a certain, like, there's parts of that movie that feel like you're watching 300, and I feel like
Yeah.
maybe
And
that's not
also
exactly what Tolkien
you were
intended,
about to
you know.
you were also about to say something about costumes, and that's
But
what the series has
yeah,
been hugely criticized, that the
Mhm.
costumes just don't live how they've been lived through. Every costume looks like it's just fresh off the rack. And like as you know, like I'm reviewing Andor, and that's something I just keep repetitively praising Andor for, that every single costume feels like it's been man-made or passed through generations. It all feels very organic, and something that, do you think that would have helped the series if we had a bit of more attention
well,
to details in there?
so the way I've been looking, so again, 4 episodes in, and I've seen, some significant parts of the rest of the series, but not enough. Well, I'm assuming the costumes don't change, but they don't, like, all of a sudden. It's not like they're making these 10, 15-year time jumps like in
No.
House of the Dragon. So, uh, I just got
No,
the
they're not.
feeling that this show was trying to give off this effect that this is a very much like the peak of their prime kind of a world, like pretty far away from the last Dark Age and a good distance away from the next one that we know comes to pass with Sauron and all that. So they wanted to show a world that was more pristine, and that's probably where like the overall production design direction came from. The cost, in terms of like the quality of the costumes, I mean, like they didn't spare any expense. Like it looked great. And the one thing I was worried about with this show, what happens a lot with fantasy shows and movies today, is they go CGI heavy, but then they also overproduce some of the costumes. So what you end up seeing is like this sort of like this artificial look, where I always appreciated, like, when they made like the Robin Hood movie in the 90s. Like there was a certain like real quality to it, because they just like, you felt like you could go and put this together yourself if you had enough money. Like I think so it didn't get so far out of hand for me in terms of the costume design that it felt like it was done, like it wasn't tangible, I guess is the word maybe to
So
use.
wait, so you're saying that you think that the quality of the Rings of Power, the costumes do look good? Like you
Yes,
think like that's so funny. I actually I thought they looked terrible
no,
in
well,
some.
Yeah.
so what I mean,
Like
so
manic.
what I'm trying to I'm
It
trying to
was like
defend
Party
the
City.
I think the issue is less of a do they objectively look good or bad. I think it's more of like I said, like if you think about this, like the prequel, like more closer to the prequel Star Wars trilogy, where everything was meant to look like it was brand new, not like the lived-in Star Wars of the old. This feels like that. It's not meant to, I guess, feel like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where you're living in a time of oppression. It feels like more of a pristine world. I mean, I guess what I'm leading to here is, as the show goes on into its next seasons, like they're gonna like dirty up like just watch. I've seen shots from the
I
last
mean, I hope
episode,
so, but
and they
the
look
thing is
like
Harfoots.
everything
But
got
even
worn down.
Harfoots, even though they didn't have gold or silver, I just did not believe 1 second that they lived in those clothes. It was costume. I feel like
Yeah.
that the
Dan,
magic is gone. Like as much as they tried to
Yeah.
cover it with CGI or like beautiful setting, that's something that Hobbit had. Hobbit actually did make sure that every costume looked like those dwarves really lived in that. It was over CGI'd, but things like costumes, they did help this magic. Cinema's all about magic and the show. And
I'm gonna argue that that's not the case. I didn't get that.
Dan, you'd be such a good manager for defending.
I literally could not. Okay, honestly, I've not seen the entirety of either of The Hobbit or The Lord of the, like I mentioned, and none of the previous trilogies. I have not seen them in their entirety, but I've seen enough of them that I could not distinguish like the level of like quality or like, I mean, basically, if I could imagine a Harfoot from this show walking into any of those 6 movies, and it wouldn't seem like they didn't fit, because overall I felt like the design matched enough. If anything, there was more attention to detail here, and I think the one thing okay, this is coming from clearly somebody who's not a fan inherently of like Lord of the Rings franchise, maybe in a way that I am a fan of like say the Stargate franchise or something like that. So I don't feel like the sense of nostalgia about it, and so I don't feel like there was a definitive take that they have to match. And to that end, I feel like this just feels like an updated, more upscale, higher quality version of what we have gotten in the past, and that's kind of how I looked at it.
It's not, yeah. But the thing is, even things like script writing, like the script was painful to listen to.
That I
and
agree
you
with.
must agree with us on that one. Some of the scenes, it was just like, what are you talking about? It's like, I don't believe that you guys speak to each other like this. And then we were talking about accents as well.
I have a pet peeve about rolling R's. When your natural accent does not kind of lean in that direction. Like I've got a American English accent at this point, but like I wasn't born in the US. So and when I don't speak English, I roll my R's in a different language. But when I'm speaking English, I generally don't roll R's. So if I were to like say a word where you would otherwise roll your R's, I don't really do that unless I'm speaking that same word in a different language, like usually names. But then in this show, it just like, yeah, Galadriel was the worst offender, because like she's like Sauron, and like you could just hear the R's coming out, and I'm just, it took me out of the show,
servant of Morgoth.
It's too much. It's because she has like the cleanest British accent. I don't know, what Mags, would you say, was that like a London kind of a thing? Like what kind of, because it seemed like it's not like a Manchester accent.
That's what I mean. She speaks very, very clean, because I know her from, I remember, I keep bringing this film up that she was fantastic in it, like Saint Maud. That's why she's really talented actress, but it's almost like she's under so much pressure to get the character right and to sound the certain way. And I don't know if she was able to handle it. That's why the accent was one of the things she really started to play to in order to like do a better job, which in my opinion, she didn't need to, because I think she's fully capable of like pulling this off. It's a shame. And speaking of Sauron, so I called it two episodes before the actual revelation that's Sauron, but that was one of my critiques. I wish that was hidden better. I think they've given me too many pieces to put it together. I wish there was and especially last episode we actually had, the shots which show how Bronn, looking at Galadriel, and like there was just too many clues for me. And I think maybe that would have actually maybe even saved the season for me if I was completely taken by surprise.
And not only that, but like the hinting at things like to kind of wink at the audience thing, like when Halbrand says we're not making 2 crowns, we're making something small,
something else,
and he acts
like a wink.
It's like why don't do that, like come on, be real, like
be subtle.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so I mean, you could argue that maybe that was the hint that Sauron knows what his plan is, that he wants to make his plan all along, but then it's like, well, he's stupid as hell for doing that in the first place. Like, I think rings would be a really good idea. It's like Dr. Evil, like rings.
Exactly. But actually, exactly, it's Doctor Evil, but that's what actually I appreciated that the series brought me. Like it did give me, it fills some gaps essentially, knowing sorry, my thingy died, sorry about that. We got to see inside of Sauron's mind, and I absolutely love that, like to see his motivations, to get a bit of a background story, and seeing him as like a really broken person who thinks he's doing something for his own, in his own reality, which is like good, but it actually obviously it's not, because he's killing millions of people and stuff living in Middle Earth in order to get what he wants. But I really enjoy that expose, and I wish I almost had more of that. So I hope we'll see the whole transformation from the like human looking like Sauron to actually Sauron in this full suit. You know, like I'm kind of excited to see like the journey between the two.
That's an interesting take, because like I mean, you saying that, it's a good point. For me, I feel like the fact that they did go that route felt like it was another means to not take any risks with how they were telling their story, because that is a huge trope right now, like especially because, you know, it's like the prequels as if it's Star Wars, which is what they did with Anakin before he became Darth Vader. And I'm not saying that that's not a good storyline, you know, and it is very interesting to see what pushes somebody to become so evil. I mean, he already was evil, Sauron. Like he was tricked or anything, but and that's a good point. But
and
yeah,
how he managed to deceive, you know, I liked how, you know, elves always talk about the enemy and they're deceiving and fooling and stuff, and you could really see him being like this puppet master. And I don't know, for like, I always appreciate a good villain, and I kind of got a little taste. So again, I think I'm turning into Dan. I'm starting to defend the series, but like, I actually am glad I got this little taste of what
you're saying that as if
they
it's the
could have
bad
done.
thing. I mean, come on.
No, it's not.
Can I make a couple of counterpoints? I was just gonna say this about the Sauron reveal, right? Like, let's just play devil's advocate for a moment. Going into this show, and like, you know, kind of back when we got the first trailer, we figured out like who the cast is, or like who the and then like what characters we're gonna see. They had this character of Halbrand, and we clearly like people pointed it out like straight away, like, wait, there's no Halbrand in Lord of the Rings. Like, who is this guy? So that right there was sort of like a giveaway, even though maybe that's not right when people start to speculate that is this a Sauron, or, but like, you know, I think it was kind of there from the beginning. So my question would be like, do you think they actually were trying to hide it? And then the way they treat the whole, how he starts behaving in the latter, like the last couple episodes, it's sort of like they've built it up to the point where it's almost like, it's not like they're trying to, I mean, because if they were trying to hide it, like I feel like they could have thrown in a couple of more red herrings our way, but it feels like they didn't even try that. So do you think they even were trying to make it a twist, or was it more like they didn't want to insult the intelligence of the audience members who they knew at this point had, you know, at least the people who were knowledgeable of the franchise figured it out
of the audience based off of the rest of the show, but
they also did create some fictional characters. You know, Isildur's sister. That's a new character. I remember reading about it.
Isildur's horse.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I thought Halbrand was the only new character, but yeah, no,
I think that he had the brother in a book. But yeah, anyway, I wished, you know what, they actually should have left it when Adar, the first ever orc, essentially, he asked them, "Who are you?" And then Halbrand just gives him a look. That was when I thought, okay, this is Sauron. But if they just left it at that without giving those little, him glancing at Galadriel, trying to investigate his background, like that was completely unnecessary. So no, to answer your question, I really don't think they were trying to hide it. They were really underestimating people's intelligence. That's what I mean. Some of the best, like
I
Andor,
think to the contrary, right? Like, because if they were trying to, okay, so because like what the point I'm trying to make is, it wasn't like it was well hidden from the beginning. Like, you didn't have to dig very hard to kind of connect the dots, and then like the way the character starts to act in the last few episodes, it's almost like they're telling the audience, you know, that this is Sauron. We're not going to try to insult your intelligence by pretending that it's not. I do understand
it was
this is.
needless.
But the point that some of the things that you guys mentioned was the writing, like the dialogue, and like, you know, it's like really on the nose, and it's almost like they're winking at the audience, which feels like an MCU way of doing things that really feels out of place for this franchise. And to that end, I wanted to ask you something. You've mentioned this in your reviews. You've talked about the fact that the two showrunners here are basically newbies at this kind. I mean, look, this is the most expensive TV show of all time. But even if it wasn't, like a show of this scale, of this ambition, and like this is meant to be like the cream of the crop prestige TV. So these two guys don't have nearly the experience that you would otherwise warrant putting them in charge of something like this. And I feel like, and I'll pose this as a question, but my opinion is I feel like some of the shortcomings in the writing, especially the dialogue, comes from that, because they maybe think that this is the right way to do Tolkien dialogue. But you tell me, like, you guys know the franchise better. Was that a symptom of these two young people are just learning on the job, or was it like something else that affected
Dan,
the quality?
Would you ever give me and Catriona 100 million or quarter of a billion and be like, can you make a TV series based on one of the most important fantasy franchises ever? I would not be surprised if they casted someone, I don't know, the showrunners of Game of Thrones, even though they got enough heat for the last few seasons, but that would have been a lot more.
Well, because this show ran like 8
do a
seasons
better
of the
job
show.
than these people. Yeah.
Huh?
I mean, they had a resume. Like, they're coming at you saying, we ran 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. Not like any random fan of Game of Thrones. Like, hate it, like it or hate the last season. They ran that thing. I mean, you know, like, that's a resume.
Ran it into the ground.
It's not, and these guys, I don't even know how many shows like they've exec produced before. So, but granted, they're not the only two people in the writers' room, but they are like the two lead voices. Like everything runs through them. So maybe somebody in the writers' room had like mentioned like, hey, this sounds really not natural the way they're talking.
We also talked about
overruled.
this. They had huge restrictions. They were only restricted to the appendix as we know, and then the grandchild of Tolkien, he's like sort of like the head of the Tolkien estate right now, and apparently they've been sort of in a close collaboration with the like real estate and whatever they Tolkien estate real estate. So whatever they actually show them, they were happy. They were like satisfied enough to be like yes. But my fear of that is that I think what they were shown were just images. I don't think no one ever looked at the actual script, because that was the beauty of the Lord of the Rings, right, Catriona? Like it was so natural for people to speak, you know, the wizard never arrives, and I can't remember the actual quote, but like when the way Gandalf spoke, right? It was very natural, and it made you believe so much into that character existing.
But it was also, you know, it was naturally like brilliantly written. And I'm thinking, you know, in yesterday's episode, the last episode, that however the stranger, who I mean there I guess is Gandalf, I'm not sure, by the way, like everybody's like but the audience shouldn't be stupid enough to not think it's Halbrand, and here I am thinking it's probably the stranger is Sauron. But anyway, you know, he's talking to Nori at the end, and they're trying to recapture this clever little Gandalf talking to a hobbit, like cute moment. And I mean, maybe you could give the excuse that, you know, the stranger just got his memory back and everything, so he's still trying to learn how to, you know, and capture his own personality. But all he says to Nori is something like, you know, just follow your nose or something. And I'm like, what? Like, that's not. When is Gandalf ever said?
Yeah.
No,
it's like they actively have been destroying every sense of magic they were trying to build up. I know this is such a loaded statement, but that's how I felt. Like everything, where every scene, every moment that I was actually giving it a try, they somehow managed to pull me out and sort of just say, hey, okay, we're that dumb. We're actually going to destroy that for you. And it's like, I know you meant well, but I mean, for this amount of money, this like such a responsibility, like get someone who at least knows how to make cinema. We're not lacking in, you know, directors, and it's not the question of original, you know, IP. It's about what you decide to do based on what fuels your own imagination versus what actually is considered the good cinema. Because I much rather watch a good piece of episode which has no relation to Tolkien whatsoever, rather than be dragged through this. And really, I mean, people say this, it's like an insult to what Tolkien has produced, you know, his life's work. And like,
and
I much rather,
Oh, I was just gonna say the constant excuse is, well, it's not really Lord of the Rings, so like you can't look at it as that. But then it's like, well, then why? Why are we? Like, why are you doing this to us?
Why are you doing this to us?
I'll just say this. There is an interesting conversation to be had, and we, you know, I think it's too big of a conversation to have right now, but of this idea that, okay, well, yes, the Lord of the Rings books, they're adapting entire books, but like a book is not written like a script for a movie. So they did still have to write a lot of dialogue, like that was brand new, that was never in the book. But it just felt like they had more material to work with, so they could make it sound more in line with the original books. Whereas here, obviously, they're having to kind of invent their way through a lot of the story. But at the same time, I guess like the topic that really would be maybe a conversation of its own is, do you, in that situation, are you like obliged, or maybe is it your duty to stick to what the fans sort of know about the franchise from before, and therefore you don't have kind of the freedom to maybe reinvent the way maybe these characters, like say for example, talk, simply because there's another iteration of this franchise that exists before? Do you have to line it up with that pre-existing adaptation, or can you experiment?
They had 2 franchises. That's another mind-blowing thing, because they also, The Hobbit felt like Lord of the Rings. It was destroyed,
but it was the
through
same
special
creators,
effects.
right? So I mean, like Peter Jackson was involved. Like here, like I'm just simply posing the question, and you can make this rhetorical, or you can answer it. Maybe, and again, it could be a big conversation unto itself. That shouldn't they be allowed to maybe have some creative freedom to kind of redefine what Tolkien sounds like? It's kind of like the Roman like language, like it was Latin, for example, right? Like it's a dead language. We don't truly know what it sounded like. We sort of kind of imagine that it maybe sounded like it's some form of Italian, but
absolutely. But does it work, Dan? I don't mind them becoming its own thing, but it has to work. And
the original books are the Bible to reference. And I mean, Elven language is a made-up language that people have managed to create, and people speak it and stuff. And if you can do stuff like that, you should be able to read a bunch of books and then be able to capture the way those people speak and manage to push that through a series, you know, not with such difficulty. If you really research the material, take notes, you know, write it down, like try to get in the head of how they speak.
But I completely agree with you, Catriona, but I also understand, Dan, like, I really am not opposed to having something new. If they, I don't know, started speaking completely different language, make it, or try to do something quirky about it. It's all going back to at least have a decency, not call it Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Because that,
well, I mean, the whole point of it is just an adaptation. I think like, that would be like
but it didn't work. But that's what I was trying to tell you earlier. Like, if at least the language and this whole new approach worked on the audience, if they actually made it interesting, by all means, go ahead, throw in new dragons even and stuff. Make a Game of Thrones reference. Do whatever you want. Just don't tell me it's rain. Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining.
Okay, well. You're making some bold statements there, but all right, I get it, and that's fair. I mean, look, they can try something differently from the way it's been done before, and like Catriona, you made a good point that again they could still look at the other Lord of the Rings books. They're part of the legendarium. Like it may not be exactly like what their story they're adapting, but it is basically in line with it. And it's not like Tolkien all of a sudden started writing books differently at a certain part of his life. In fact, these are the appendixes, so like they're basically part of the same books. I get that. I mean, so maybe where the writing kind of fell short, and I had to kind of like reorient my brain after episode 1 because I'm like, they're talking like Shakespearean Old English, kind of like, well, what am I watching? Because I'm not used to it. I'm like a sci-fi person, so like people talk more direct, and it's just I had to adjust. And then eventually I kind of like it, just like, like, okay, I get it. Like, this is how they talk, and you kind of get into it. But and again, I don't have the context of all the other movies, so to me it didn't stand out as much. But fair point. There are a lot of people who are coming to this having seen the previous movies. So anyway, and we can talk about this particular, like any part of the show, like forever. So I have a couple other questions to kind of before we finish up, and the one question is, where do you think the show's going now in season 2? Like, we know now who Sauron is. I feel like the stranger is still sort of a stranger. We don't quite know who he is. But then where is the story going next season?
Well, we know he's one of the wizards for sure. So I mean, that was kind of obvious. And I'm actually glad they're still playing with this idea that we don't know who the stranger is. As I said before, I'm looking forward to finding out more about Sauron process. I think every chance that every series has to investigate a problematic, /maybe slightly deep character is like a good way to go. So I'm definitely looking forward to see more of a Halbrand / Sauron under the microscope. But everything else I'm sort of done with. I have no idea what they can surprise me with. They tease that there's going to be some really cool characters coming back from the original text. But that's my fear. Like, why do you keep on antagonizing fans with all those, like, hey, we're going to bring in the new cool character, but we're going to absolutely destroy him for you by not sticking
but
to
you're
what
making
the
an assumption
Bible
there
says.
that they'll destroy the character they're bringing back.
Oh, I mean, I think based off of this first season, we cannot get our hopes up again.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll give them the chance to improve. But okay, go ahead, Catriona.
I was just gonna say, I'm not to sound like too horrible, but I'm fingers crossed that something happens to Bronwyn where like maybe we just never see her again. She doesn't have to die, but like I just don't ever want to see her.
I feel like you're just rude to this character.
We just don't like Bronwyn.
What has she done wrong? Again, not seen the whole season.
She gave you like Aragon-worthy speech to people like, we should stay and fight. It's like
I felt like the setup was there.
A farmer.
Because she was like basically the only person with a spine in that whole town, even though like, there's a bunch of these guys who are way bigger than her in size and I just felt like they were building her up to be that sort of like a general who can kind of lead the charge.
Wasn't that Galadriel's role in the show?
Exactly.
She didn't get to the town until pretty deep in the season. I'm talking about like she's one of the people from like the tribes of man or whatever. So like whereas Galadriel would almost be frowned upon because the humans don't really trust the elves, at least the humans in the Southlands. So I just felt like they were building her up to be that like character. So to me it came natural, but that's just me. I don't know. I maybe they'll kill her off.
They completely forgot her in the final episode.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad they did. I was like, oh, thank God.
The episode felt straight away better. There's no Arondir and Bronwyn drama. Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. Look, I don't have any problem with that storyline. It is just how all three of those characters, Theo, Bronwyn, and Arondir, there's no personality to them. I don't really know like what's so interesting about Arondir. I mean, he's just brave. I mean, every elf is brave, right? They all are. And then what else is there to him? And then Bronwyn, she's a mother and she gives speeches, and what else is there? Theo, he has this staff that is a part of the connects to the whole story, which is important. What else is there? That's it.
Okay. Do you know what's prediction? Actually my dad's a huge Tolkien fan. Shout out to Dad. Do you know he bets on that one of the witch king of Angmar or one of the Nazguls is going to be Theo.
Oh, I hope.
Yeah, so that's why
interesting
Theo's obsession with darkness and kind of think he's going to be easily deceived by Sauron. And I think Halbrand and Theo actually did have Halbrand and Theo actually had like this small interaction when the whole thing
The
was
Mount Doom
happening in the
blew up.
Highlands.
And
Yeah, before
sort of,
that was epic though. Okay, in all defense, that was epic. That was a cool scene.
By the way, speaking of things that weren't surprises or surprises that we saw coming, I guess, the Mount Doom thing and how they turned the Southlands into Mordor, I feel like if there was anything executed well in this in terms of being like, oh, wait, what? Wasn't that it? Like, shouldn't we give the show credit for doing that well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
that was cool. But again, I mean, the logistics of it, there's a lot, you know, like then I'm sorry. I know, like I'm
No.
yes,
like that was cool, but
that was cool.
okay.
But I mean, you know, it's like the reality is all the townspeople, most of them were fine. And it's like they were in the blast radius.
Bronwyn didn't die.
Nobody died. And it's like all of these logistics things that like should realistically kill something. Like, okay, in this last episode, the beginning of the episode, Galadriel shows up with Halbrand, he's injured, and she says, "We've been riding for 6 days straight, no breaks." I'm like, those horses would have died, like, you know, by day, like they can't run.
Maybe no, if they're elven horses, this is my nerd brain. If they're elven horses, they can do that. Like Aragorn's horse was pretty like, but you know, we had more empathy. Speaking of horses, we had more understanding and empathy for these horses than Isildur those horses, who's FYI completely missing. It's like they decided to drop.
Well, he let it go, right?
Storyline, and we don't know. Like we know he's alive, obviously, because he's gonna play a big role later on. But it's not enough to even. Yeah. Anyway. We can go on, but I mean, hopes for the future. Yes, I'll definitely watch it then, because I want to know more about Middle Earth. But yeah, it's going to be difficult not to like. I wonder if the viewership's going to be there for second season.
This show has been doing so well, and I've not heard anything about like the viewership dropping off. It's like there's a global audience for this that in some ways is even bigger than Game of Thrones. And speaking of like House of the Dragon, like it's been matching almost what the House of the Dragon's been doing, and then beating it in
it's all the
a lot
YouTuber
of markets.
reviews.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
just everybody.
Our channel, like. I don't know how if accurately this reflects the actual interest in the show, but like when we have been uploading reviews for this show and uploading reviews for House of the Dragon, we've been getting a lot more interest for the Rings of Power reviews than we have been for the House of the Dragon. And again, I mean, we're a relatively small channel still, but
it's because we're doing a great job, Dan.
Maybe. Okay. I'll give you credit. I gotta say, when Catriona channels are in Galadriel, it's really neat to listen to. So.
No, you didn't pronounce it right, Dan. Galadriel.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's some of the critiques have been really neat to look. I honestly, the horse, like, oh, there he goes. So I love watching those reviews. Okay, so to kind of like wrap this whole conversation up, we've talked about where the show is going. We've talked about how things began and you know everything in between. But I did want to kind of touch upon this briefly. The show, season 1 was done mostly in New Zealand, which is where the Peter Jackson movies were done. Now they're moving production for season 2, which they just started, to England. Now Tolkien, when he wrote the books, I mean, he was a British man. He wrote the books in England. I don't think he had New Zealand in mind. It was really Peter Jackson who said, "Man, there's this beautiful country that I live in. Maybe I should film the movies here. It's probably also cheaper." And Beta came out of it and all that. But now that they're moving production to England, do you think that's A, going to have an effect on the show in terms of quality? And then B, like, is it even significant, or are people making, a big deal out of this? Should they even be doing that? I mean, does it matter where they're filming it as long as it kind of looks similar to what we've already seen?
I think it'll end up being like the only like truth to Tolkien effort that they're going to put into it. So, I mean, I guess there's that. As long as the landscapes, I mean, are they only filming in England? Are they filming just Britain, like Scotland as well?
I'm sure they're, the United Kingdom, so probably Scotland, Wales, England, Ireland,
they
Northern
must.
Ireland.
Yeah.
I mean, Scotland's got the most scenic.
Right. And that could work. Maybe if they're taking it in like a darker tone, not to say that I think that Scotland's a darker country than New Zealand, but
no. It's a beautiful country.
There's something to it. It is, yeah. And there's something to it, the landscape. It's, I think, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I no, I agree with you. I don't think because of the Hobbit trilogy, they really again they went back to New Zealand and it's almost like they got rid of all the scenes, whatever they had to, or like wherever location they found it, they were like, oh, we wanted to shoot here, but we couldn't afford at the time. I think we've seen so much of in New Zealand now that I think it's going to be interesting to see different parts of it. And yeah, we are going to be seeing different places. You know, we're not in Rivendell, we're not in, you know, Misty Mountains. It is meant to look different. And to maybe answer the question whether England or Scotland can uphold the beauty of you know, the Middle Earth, sure. I see that for sure.
Right.
So
It'd be a good location for like castles and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, ruins and things like that. What were you gonna say, Dan?
I was gonna say, look, England and Scotland and even Wales. I mean, they have the countryside is beautiful. I mean, I've been there. I mean, Mags, you've lived there. I've lived there much more briefly than you, but it's beautiful. Like Andor has shot a lot in England and Scotland for their season,
yeah,
and it looks beautiful. I'm sure they're gonna still film in other parts of the world. They've got the money to, certainly, but it seems like a lot of the soundstage stuff, at least, they're gonna do in England. I personally, I think that, look, they can only go up from here, if anything. I mean, and these guys now have one season under their belt, the executive producers. Hopefully, they'll improve. I'll give it a fair shot. Again, I still have to watch like all these, like 4 episodes all the way through. I've seen them in parts, and the first 4 I've seen all the way through. I'm optimistic. We don't think we're gonna get the second season until like 2024, so it's gonna be a while. So if
we
there's
can
anybody
calm down
itching for more,
make
you're gonna
her
have to wait.
peace.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
what's next? Like, what's next for like, because you said this was like such a highly anticipated series and stuff. What do you think will be equivalent to the scale of this? Like, what should we watch out for?
I guess there's gonna be Mandalorian season 3 where they're trying to retake Mandalore, so that looks pretty epic.
Yay.
I know they're doing a second season of Foundation. If you haven't seen that on Apple TV Plus, that looked the first season is great. Like, watch it if you haven't. And yeah, it's like basically Star Wars borrows a lot of its stuff and a lot of its concepts from Foundation. It's been picked apart by other people and copied over the years to the point that it's like you go and watch Shakespeare and you're like, Romeo and Juliet is like every movie I've ever seen, like every tragedy or whatever, but like that was the first one. That's like Foundation in the sci-fi realm, like where it's been done so many times since that you don't know, you're like, this isn't anything new, but it's because it was the OG of it all. Anyway, yeah, The Rings of Power, hopefully it was a good experience for you. It wasn't too painful to watch and review the episodes every week.
It was great.
Is there anything else you guys would like to mention before we wrap up here?
No, I'm good.
This is like the moment in the Zoom call where everybody just stops talking and we're like, awkward silence. Okay. All right. Well,
no.
I'm looking forward to season 2, however long it takes to get here. I still have to finish season 1, obviously. Maybe I'll feel different after that. And it looks like the two of you are sort of in the middle. Like, are you gonna be watching when season 2 debuts?
I'm gonna decide in 2 years when it comes out. I don't want to jump too quickly. I want to feel it out.
I know myself, and I think I will have enough time to forget and forgive. I mean, not forget, but definitely forgive, and then I'll give it a shot. Just because I want to see what's going to happen to Sauron. Like, I'm just very interested in his journey right now, and everyone else, it's like, nope. Can we have half of the recasts, and can we, just not do certain things? Yeah, I just hope they will learn the lessons from the season and the reception, and they really take fans into consideration, knowing how much of toxicity they created before the show even started. So yeah.
Well, they've got 2 years. Well, they're already shooting now, but like they've got plenty of time to learn from their mistakes and get better. Well, with that, Yeah, look, I guess this is all we got time to do. Well, we actually went a lot longer than we wanted to. But hey, if you guys watched season 1 of The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime, you liked it, you didn't like it, let us know in the comments below. We have really appreciated that you come back every week to watch these reviews that we've been doing on the show. So we really do appreciate your time and then all the likes, and we'll take the dislikes. Leave us a comment. Tell us what we were doing wrong, what we could do better. But with that in mind, hey, we're still reviewing Andor. We're still reviewing House of the Dragon. A lot of people don't like what Andrew has to say about that, but we do enjoy the comments, that roast Andrew's takes. We've got a lot more to come on the channel in the coming weeks and months. There's Black Adam and Black Panther, Avatar: The Way of Water. So I'll be looking forward to Mags and Catriona's reviews on those. But in the meantime, like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and thanks for watching our coverage of The Rings of Power. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.